I'm riding Jordan Binnington right to the end, guys. And it's not a statement on Joe Hofer. That's because Jordan Binnington is my starting goaltender, right? So I think you're coming right back with Jordan Binnington. Jordan Binnington in Washington, and then you decide whether or not you're going Hofer on Saturday and Binnington in Dallas on Sunday, or the other way around. So to me, Hofer starts 2 and Binnington is starting the rest unless something else falters.
That's what I would have done. That's what Chris Kerber had to say yesterday on the show with us, with Alex and T-Bone. I'm BK. You're listening to BK and Ferrario here on 101 ESPN. Blues back in action this evening. They are in the nation's capital out in D.C., going up against the Capitals. And Alex, it has been announced they will not be going with Jordan Binnington tonight. Instead, it's going to be Joel Hofer. They're sticking with their 2-to-1 split that they've had for the majority of the time under Jim Montgomery. I was curious what the explanation would be for this, and we've got that explanation now via Jim Montgomery.
It's not necessarily that. It's, we are conscientious of what Benner's just been through, and we have a really good 1A backup, So just with the schedule, we just 3 and 4 coming up again. You got to make sure that you're balancing out so that our energy levels, our goaltenders are really important to our success.
Okay. I get, generally speaking, why they're doing this. I've said this in the past. I think Binnington is a 45 to 50 game starter. I don't think you want to push him any further than that. He's not Connor Hellebuck. This is not a guy, like in Major League Baseball, you've got some starters that give you 200 innings. You've got other guys that are like Blake Snell. Hey, you're going to get 150 great innings out of him and be thankful for what you get and don't ask for anything more. Sonny Gray is kind of that way, right? He's a number 1 starter, but he's not the classic ace that's going to go out there and shove for 7-8 innings at a time. That's more what Binnington is. Binnington, when he's out there and when he's in a big game, he's going to step up for you. Alex, to me, this was a spot where you ride him. You go with it because this is a push moment during the season before you throttle it back a little bit right before the NHL trade deadline. You've got another 5 games, or 4 games really, prior to the deadline. Washington tonight, LA and Dallas over the weekend. You were always going to have to split those games between Hofer and Binnington. You got one more going up against LA next Wednesday. So there is a bit of a rest between the weekend and LA. I would have gone with Binnington in this game. I would have pushed him. I would have said, hey, Binnington, I know you just did the Four Nations face-off, and we understand this may be pushing it a little bit. But this is what we need. You're our number 1 dude. We're going to ride or die with you in this moment. And you know what? I bet you Binnington would have been more than happy to do that if they had asked him to. They're not going that direction. They are going with Joel Hofer. He's a capable backup, but I would have gone the other direction. What'd you make of the choice, Alex?
I would have gone the other direction, too. Yes, Joel Hofer is a capable backup, and yes, as Jim Montgomery said, you need both goalies if you're going to have success the rest of the way. But if you look at Joel Hofer's numbers in his last 5 starts, he's only had 2 of those 5 where he's had a above 900 save percentage. And Jordan Binnington, I said this yesterday, he's tracking the puck better than I've seen him all season. So I would have gone with Jordan Binnington. Scotty Bowman used to always say that it's like, I'm going to ride my number 1 goaltender every scenario in a must-win game. And that's where you're at right now. You're in must-win territory. Thomas told the morning show that today, like, hey, we got to we got to force Doug Armstrong's hand not to sell. You've got to play Jordan Binnington. But, I mean, to play the other side of this one, because I told you my opinion of it, I do know that David Alexander, the goaltending coach, has a lot more information behind the scenes than what we're accustomed to. And Jim Montgomery takes David Alexander's word like gospel. What he says is kind of how they go with the goaltending decision. And David Alexander, Joey has referenced this earlier in the season, says that we have to be very mindful of Jordan Binnington's workload because when he gets exhausted, his play takes a step backwards. And I don't know where he's at right now. Maybe there's still a little exhaustion coming off of that Four Nations tournament. And putting a Jordan Binnington into a game if he is gassed, that's not going to turn out very pretty. We've seen that in the past. So that's part of it. The other part of it, and I know David Alexander looks at how goaltenders fare against other team or against the team that they're taking on. And earlier this season, Binnington was the one that played against Washington, and he got 8 goals past him. So I think all of those kind of come into the conversation when you're talking about this, and it's probably why they leaned towards this decision. But I'll go back to what I said at the beginning. He's your number 1 guy. He's tracking the puck better than Joel Hofer is right now. This is a must-win game for the Blues. I would have put him out there against this Washington Capitals team and then played Joel Hofer on Saturday against the LA Kings.
Yeah, man, I understand. 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service X line to get involved in the show. YouTube chat is available for you at youtube.com/101ESPN STL. Want to hear from you throughout the day today. Somebody in the YouTube chat said that they think that the LA game is more important than this game against Washington. That's totally fair. The way that I would have split it up, I would have gone Binnington tonight, Hofer on Saturday against LA, and then Benner on Sunday against Dallas and Benner on Wednesday against LA. So you do get Binnington in one of those 2 games against LA, and then you get him again in that, potentially at least, in that March 8th game against the Kings as well. So you're getting plenty of Jordan Binnington against the Kings. The best team that you're going to face over the next week is Washington. It's the game that you're playing tonight. I need my best on the ice against their best, because in these next 4 games, if you are somebody that believes that the Blues can, should, and will try to contend this year, they want to get back to the playoffs, and I believe that's their internal North Star goal, well, then you go with your best dude against the best team that you're facing. So I'm really genuinely surprised by this decision. I did not think this was the way that they were going to go. I said yesterday I thought there was at least a chance of it, because this is what it's been all year long. But I was hoping for some urgency. We talked all year last year during the Cardinals season about how they lacked urgency, right? It felt as though they were doing this with the season, where it was like, oh, yeah, we know we got to get our best lineup out there, but, load management is kind of important. And people crushed them for it. How are you talking about load management when you're trying to get back into the race? Can't you see that you need to show some urgency? Can't you see that, yes, I understand Sonny Gray wants to go 5 innings and dive out of the game. You got to push him. This is your number 1 guy. So if we're going to be critical of the Cardinals for lacking that urgency during their season, I have to have that same energy right now for the Blues, where Hofer's not a terrible goalie. Your number 1... If I ask this question, who's the guy you trust more in a big game, Hofer or Binnington?
Binnington, without even thinking.
100% of our audience will say Jordan Binnington. 100%. And so I think it's a little, dishonest if we're trying to say in that same breath, oh, Hofer's going to be fine. Maybe he will. Maybe it works out and they end up having a shutout tonight. That's in the realm of the possible. But to me, the best course of action here was going with Jordan Binnington in this game tonight against the Washington Capitals.
You've yet to win 3 games in a row. This is, the 9th opportunity to do that this season? Like, you're in a position where you have to win hockey games. And I can understand the other side of the fence, because it doesn't give you the best shot to win if Binnington is gassed. And again, I don't know what the conversation is. Maybe Binnington does feel like he needs a little bit more rest, and that's what they're doing in this case. But if he's good to go, he should be in between the pipes, because he gives you your best chance to win. And right now, I'm not going to look at this as, well, the LA game is more important than the Washington Capitals game. No, every game is important right now. Like, you cannot lose or at least fall in regulation no matter what, especially between now and the trade deadline. Because if you want Doug Armstrong's hand to be forced to not sell, stand pat, or maybe potentially be a cautious buyer, well, then you got to pick up points. And if you drop this one in regulation, and I just go back and look at some of these games that Joel Hofer has played in, he's been fine, but like the Florida Panthers game, you didn't get the 1 save that you needed to. That Colorado Avalanche game, you gave up the 5 goals, I think that was. So, like, yeah, I'm seeing a ton of texts right now saying maybe Monty is going with the better goaltender. Binnington hasn't been good all season. Take whatever happened pre-Four Nations tournament out of the equation. Right now, Jordan Binnington is tracking the puck as best as I've seen. He is as confident as I have seen. This is Binnington time. You've only played him 37 games this season. You've been cautious. There's no more cautious that needs to take place with Binnington from now on.
At least not right now. Again, like, if you wanted to do this after the deadline, because the deadline is going to be a pivot point of their regular season. It's going to be. There's just no other way around it. We're going to talk later today with Nick Kypreos, who's been all over the Blues to Toronto potential pipeline of, hey, is it Pavel Buchnevich? Is it Braden Shen? Is it Colton Parayko? Is it Jordan Binnington? Hey, why not just all of them? I joke, of course, but like, Braden Shen to Toronto is really something that is gaining steam, at least within the media, even if not in reality. We're going to talk to Kypreos about that at 12 o'clock. If you do that at the deadline, well, then you've made your choice, and you're not really trying to contend this year. Now it becomes a legit pivot in season. I want to give this team the best chance, though, to show me what they're capable of. And the best way, in my opinion, to do that over the next 4 games, which is all the runway that exists now, after they have won each of their last 2 games, potential for a 3-game winning streak, by the way, tonight for the first time all year, potential for a 5-game point streak for just the second time this year, which, if you extend that on Saturday against LA, be the first 6-game point streak of the season. I want to give them the best chance to get there. And the best way to do that is with Jordan Binnington in net, going up against Alex Ovechkin and what is now the second best team in the NHL by points. That to me is the way that I would have done it. I think Jim Montgomery has done a pretty damn good job at just about everything since being named the head coach of the St. Louis Blues. I really do. And it's okay to sometimes have disagreements with the coaches that are in charge. I disagree with Ollie on certain things, and I think Ollie's a good manager, despite most of our audience disagreeing with me on that. That's fair. I think this is a misstep for them tonight, and that's just the way that I view it.
Can't wait for Joel Hofer to post a shutout.
Yeah, and that's in play. Like, it is. Sometimes, even if you disagree with the decision, and you think it's probably a 60-40 choice tonight, I would go with Binnington. I think that's the 60% side, in my opinion. But, yeah, sure, you can go with Hofer. It's not like – this is not like playing Taylor Motter at shortstop every day. It's not that.
They were like the same thing.
No, they were not.
But it is, in my opinion, a pretty questionable decision.
And I will say with the Joel Hofer side of the coin, you're finding out for people that continue to this is going to sound super Tony, and I apologize, blab about Joel Hofer being ready to be the number one guy, trade away Jordan Binnington. You're about to find out. This is a very important game, and you want a goaltender to go out there and be your best player.
Somebody from the 636 said, guys, you haven't even seen the results yet, and you're acting like they lost.
It's about the process
for
me.
This is going to sound bad.
You were about to go Tony there. I don't care about the loss. It's the decision.
Correct.
The loss or win doesn't matter. It's the decision that he went with.
It's what gives you the best chance to win, right? You should pre-guess decisions. You should not question them after the fact. If you thought it was the right call, the result, this is going to sound strange, I know. The result actually doesn't matter that much. It's about, did you have the right process in place to get you to the correct decision? And to me, I question the process a little bit here. Sometimes I question the process with Ollie and some of his decisions. Sometimes you guys probably question the process of how we got to certain decisions on what we're talking about over the course of the show. That's okay. Yeah. Sometimes we have a bad process that leads to a really great segment. It happens. You fall into stuff sometimes. That could happen tonight. Maybe they fall into a shutout by Joel Hofer.
And just like when just like when I question our process in our show meetings, I get yelled at, just like BK just yelled.
That was Tony when you said they'll fall into a shutout.
Coming up in 15 minutes, we're going to talk to Joey Vitale. He's going to join us via the Callier and Thompson hotline. Always good to catch up with our guy, Joe. We will also talk with Nick Kypreos coming up at 12 o'clock. He's an NHL insider for Sportsnet, hosts a show on 590 The Fan in Toronto. We'll talk to him about all of the steam with Braden Shin potentially as one of the top targets, at least, for the Toronto Maple Leafs. We'll talk with him about that coming up at 12. Coming up next, though, what is your level of concern on the Cardinals' early spring training offensive performance? T-Bone seems to be at a 10 already. We'll talk to him about it next here on 101 ESPN. All right, so what's your level of concern on the Cardinals offense? It's been putrid, to put it plainly. So far, Kaepernick 4 for 9, Weatherholt 2 for 6 with a homer, Victor Scott 3 for 5, a homer, and a triple. Those are nice numbers, right? Those 3 players, Kaepernick, Weatherholt, Scott, 3 players that, by the way, might not be on the opening day roster.
Guys.
And the Redbirds are going to be awesome in Memphis.
They're a combined 9 for 20 with 3 extra base hits. The rest of the roster, 17 for 130, which is a 130 batting average, with 7 extra base hits.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
That sounds like last year's team.
That's it. What are they with runners in scoring position, BK?
They barely get into scoring position, so not good.
This is great.
T-Bone
like
looked
the
it up
floor of
last
a 100
night.
loss team,
The only team that's been worse offensively, again, it's incredibly early, in spring training is the Chicago White Sox, who have not yet won a game in spring training.
That checks out.
You guys know my personal outlook on this, especially early on. I just don't care.
Results don't matter.
It's just it's terrible radio, and I understand that, but I do not care about the results. The process matters to me, and that's the theme of the show so far. If you look like you have lost a step, that's something worth noting, right? Or if you're like Nolan Gorman a couple of years ago, just looked better defensively in the field. Okay, that's something that might translate to the regular season. But like timing should be off at this point in time. Of course it is. Pitchers are, of course, trying out new stuff, so I don't expect them to totally be locked in at this point in spring training either. So I don't care too much about the results. T-Bone, you're somebody that cares a little bit more about the spring training results. What is your level of concern right now with their early offensive performance? Because it's hard for me to discredit it. It's been horrible thus far, and you'd like to see it be better.
Yeah, I think right now, because it is currently just 5 games for them, I would look at it and say it's currently a 6 for me. That's where my level of concern is on 1 to 10. Like, I'm not completely panicked yet, but like I looked last night because I was curious, because we've seen this in the past where it is, hey, the offense doesn't look good, but then when you start to really like look at, okay, who's getting the at-bats, it's like all the guys that like you're not expecting. Like you mentioned Kaepernick, he's gotten quite a few at-bats. He's probably not on the team when it comes to when they're building out their roster for opening day. But a lot of their regulars are getting a decent amount of at-bats here early in spring. Like Arenado's playing again today. Villar's played quite a bit so far already. Wynn's played a decent amount so far. Gorman's got a lot of at-bats. Walker's got a lot of at-bats. And a lot of these guys, like, it's one thing to say timing is off, but I'm seeing a lot of non-competitive at-bats here early in spring. And maybe that does change as things start to go along. But I am a little worried because this is in the range of outcomes for this team offensively. And maybe it's just because I had these pre-season fears. Because when we talk about the Cardinals, like you've asked me before, like what's my reservations on saying the Cardinals could be an 85 to 90 win team this season? It's not about their pitching. It's about their offense. And I worry about their offense this season of not having a middle of the order that can really bring some oomph to a lineup. I don't think they've got the dudes. And right now, it's a lot of dudes not doing a lot of things. And when you're anywhere close to the White Sox offensively, even though it's early in spring training, yeah, that's going to pique my ears up a little bit. So I am watching the offense very closely as spring training continues to go along. So I would say right now I'm at a 6 on a scale of 1 to 10.
Yeah, I'm kind of in between. Like I fall more into the camp of what BK is, to where it's like, especially like the first week and a half of spring training. Like some of these guys, yes, they've been working out in the off season, but it's not the same when you're going up against live pitchers. So you expect some rust and cobwebs in the first couple of weeks. But to the point of what you do focus on in terms of like step backs or look uncomfortable, like Jordan Walker doesn't look very comfortable at the plate, which is a little concerning. Nolan Arenado trying to get into the lineup as consistency as he is, a little concerning in terms of that. Like the fact that Victor Scott and J.J. Weatherholt are the guys that have done the most offensively, good sign for the future. Not great for the right now, but before I start hitting the panic button, I need to like 2 weeks or 3 weeks of spring training action to where you can say like, okay, cobwebs are shaking off. You've seen enough of this by now. You should be adapting to live pitching. So I'd probably put it at like a 4 for me right now.
Yeah, I'm going to go through the worst spring training offenses from a year ago for you guys, okay? The literal worst offense in Major League Baseball in spring training last year was the Philadelphia Phillies. Do you think that translated? Did that matter at all?
I didn't see him win the World Series, so yeah.
Third worst was the Mets. Fifth worst was the Braves. Ninth worst was the Padres. Those teams were all in the bottom 9. Phillies, Mets, Braves, Padres, all in the bottom 9 in Major League Baseball in spring training offense last year. The best offense in Major League Baseball in spring training last year. You guys got any guesses? Probably the Dodgers, right? Maybe you'd go out there. Yankees. Big boppers.
Okay, so he's
getting Tony, so I'd say it's the Rockies or the Marlins.
The Seattle Mariners, who were terrible offensively a year
It's
ago.
their
So much
ballpark,
so
clearly.
that they fired their hitting coach, who the Cardinals have since hired, by the way.
Oh.
You know what? Actually,
We're not even hitting in spring.
You just connected the dots without even knowing you connected the dots. This is a disaster.
but maybe Brant Brown has actually improved his process because he was the best spring training team offensively. Now he's the worst, and it flipped during the regular season last year where they went from the best to the worst. Now they're going to go from the worst to the best. This is the better way to go about it. Giants. Third best spring training offense last year was the Giants. Fourth best was the Reds. And there's outliers here. There were other good offenses that ended up being good in spring training. The reason that I bring this up, there's just no correlation. There's no causation. There's very little that you can gain from this other than just watching the games and seeing, okay, does it look right to you? And maybe you guys end up being right. Hey, the timing's off on certain guys and that doesn't change. I know there were some real questions early on in spring last year about Goldie. Like, you watched him and it looked like he was like holding a heavier bat or something. He just didn't look right. He didn't have the same pop off of the bat. In all of spring training, that remained the case. And guess what? Didn't change when we got into the regular season. He never ended up getting hot other than like a couple of 2-week stretches at any given time. So it's possible this is very telling. I can't say that right now when we're, 4 or 5 games in to spring training? Right now, I just... Scale of 1 to 10, my concern level, based on what we've seen, not based on priors, but based on what we've seen this spring, is maybe a 2. Maybe. And that might even be extending how concerned I actually am about this offense.
Yeah.
Based on what we've seen in spring.
Yeah. I mean, if we get 2 weeks from now and we're still having the same conversation, and I guess I really shouldn't even say concern/panic because I don't really expect this offense to be very good this season. So it's kind of right in line. Now, are you going to be as bad as the White Sox? God, I hope not. But
No.
I expect him to kind of be in the middle of all of this. But, again, I went into this spring training with focus on guys like Jordan Walker and Nolan Gorman. You wanted to see strides in the right direction. I know it's only been 5 games. Doesn't give you the warm and fuzzies that they've made a turn.
And that's fair.
But before I worry...
When you get shut down by Will Warren the way that they did yesterday, and it's most of your regulars in there, it doesn't make you feel good. I get that completely.
But give me 2 weeks of this before I sit there and say it's going to be a bad year.
Exactly. Somebody on the text line, 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line. This comes from the 314. BK, at what point during spring training do we start to evaluate the process? I would say 2 to 3 weeks in. When you get into mid-May, mid-March. Mid-May would be a really long time for me to evaluate the process.
Mid-May, we're going to be talking about the offseason.
When you get into mid-March, and we've seen a couple weeks of spring training at that point, and some of the other starters, instead of really working on new pitches and stuff, they're really starting to hone in on their stuff. That's when I think you can start to really evaluate it. When you stop having some of these young guys, and there's no disrespect to Kaepernick, I think he might end up being a player for the Cardinals long term, of some kind of a 4th or 5th outfielder for them. Nice 4th outfielder with a left-handed bat off the bench.
We have about 6 of those already.
Sure. But no disrespect to him, but when guys like Kaepernick are sent down and they're no longer a part of the big league spring training, that's when I think you can really start to evaluate what you got. And it's not a perfect process at that point, but then I can at least have the discussion on whether or not these things start to matter. But right now, I'm very much not there yet. One thing that I did want to get to, Alex, before we get to Joey Vitale on the other side, there was a piece today over on ESPN.com, and they just took a flamethrower to the St. Louis Cardinals offseason. Ooh. I wanted to ask you, do you think this is fair? Do you think this is a fair way to view the Cardinals this past offseason? I call this BK reads Bradford Doolittle over at ESPN.com. It's a very wordy and very terrible headline, but that is what this segment is going to be called. St. Louis Cardinals. How would you go about describing their offseason? Bradford Doolittle. Why the heck didn't the Cardinals get a clue? Sorry, that's a little harsh, but it's exactly what they're doing in St. Louis. Even if this is truly a transition season, why are they talking about it so much? And if the idea is to truly make the roster lean and open up spots for young players, then why didn't that actually happen? The Cardinals still project as a 500 team, and if they'd actually tried this winter, they might be right there with the Cubs or the Brewers as co-favorites to win the division. would doing so have really been so inconvenient to Chaim Bloom, who's already working there, by the way, and surely has some input into any decisions that would have been made?
Does he, though?
Say what you will about the Cardinals and a fan base that likes to tout itself so much, but they do deserve better than a club that chose a season of limbo when it really didn't have to. Maybe if they find a taker for Nolan Arenado and he agrees to go, all of this will start to make more sense.
Yeah, Bradford Doolittle, everybody.
God bless you, Bradford. At least somebody's writing it down.
You think that's fair?
Absolutely, this is fair. I got angry yesterday because of the pitching staff. Yeah, what are we doing? This was supposed to be a youth movement. I had to listen to 3 press conferences of you talk about this. And then all of a sudden it went from a refresh to a transition because, well, we couldn't get rid of our contracts, so we got to kind of compete now. Yeah, I agree with the statement of, you probably could have been there with the Cubs and Brewers. You could have made the trade for Kyle Tucker, but you didn't want to because you probably weren't going to re-sign him. But you also could have traded Eric Fetty and Steven Matz and said, hey, we're going to put all of our young guys. We're really going to refresh this thing and put our young guys in the rotation. You could have gotten rid of Nolan Arenado if you wanted to. You just had to eat more money. But you said, nope, not going to do any of those. We'll just run it back.
Yeah, I think that what Bradford Doolittle said is completely fair. And I think it's because they claim they were going down a path and then they didn't accomplish that path and they end up getting stuck in the middle. And they just do nothing. They add nobody. They subtract nobody from the roster. Like, that is the definition of being stuck in the muddy middle. So, yeah, I think everything that Bradford Doolittle said is fair. I would have been on board if they said, hey, we're going to push, we're going to try and win the NL Central. I would have been on board, and I still like the idea to an extent of hey, we're going with this youth movement just so we can get answers for Chaim Bloom when he takes over next year. Well, you didn't accomplish that either. So this is why when we talked about their offseason last week, I said it's a failure right now by John Mozeliak.
And they're not even involving Chaim Bloom in anything. Like, I haven't even seen him at spring training.
I saw Gersh, though.
Are we sure that Chaim Bloom's making decisions?
I was listening to Brian Walton on his podcast last week. He said, I've seen everybody that is a part of the Cardinals organization, including Michael Gersh at Cardinals spring training. He had yet to see Chaim Bloom.
They had the spring training meeting about what the season was going to be like with Mo, Ollie, and the DeWitts. Where was Chaim?
Where's Waldo?
I don't know. With Alex and T-Bone, I'm BK. Joey Vitale joins us next here at 101 ESPN. Hey, it's BK, and it is time to unlock your inner champion. That means different things for different people. For some people, that might mean getting your testosterone levels checked. If you don't feel like you're getting the same amount out of your workouts as you once did, or you wake up in the morning and, man, you don't have the same energy. Well, that could be due to low testosterone. It happens. It's totally normal, especially men my age and a little above. Well, you could go get those levels checked at Victory Men's Health today. It's an incredibly easy process. Go to their website, victorymenshealth.com. You can find where their 4 locations are in the St. Louis metro area: O'Fallon, Missouri, O'Fallon, Illinois, Sunset Hills, and Town and Country. That Town and Country location is the one that I typically go to, and it is absolutely stunning inside. You walk in, sometimes you go to these places and you feel like you're walking into your typical hospital, right? It's dimly lit, it's white all over, it's brutal. This place is like going to a clubhouse of some kind. It's absolutely stunning, state-of-the-art location out in Town and Country, but they have 4 of them available for you. You can check them all out at victorymenshealth.com. Check them out today. Unlock your inner champion with Victory Men's Health and victorymenshealth.com.
Taylor Hendrickson here, the Sports Center update driven by Johnny Londoff Chevrolet and Johnny Londoff Autoplex. Cardinals back in spring training action here in just about 30 minutes as they'll be taking on the Miami Marlins. Cal Quantrill gets the start for Miami. Andre Palante will get the start for St. Louis. And the Blues will be back in action tonight as they visit the Washington Capitals. We'll have pregame coverage starting at 5 o'clock with Alex Ferrario, then puck drop at 6. The Sports Update is driven by Johnny Londoff Chevrolet and Johnny Londoff Autoplex. See Londoff.com. Chevy, together we drive. Are you kidding me?
With Alex and T-Bone on BK, you got BK and Ferrario here on 101 ESPN. Huge game for the Blues tonight, taking on the Capitals in the nation's capital. Pre-game with Alex starts at 5 o'clock. Puck drop in Washington at 6. And right now we go out to the Callie and Thompson hotline to be joined by our friend, the Blues analyst for 101 ESPN, and of course, FanDuel Sports Midwest. He is Joey Vitale, joining us as he does each and every Thursday on BK and Ferrario. Joe, appreciate the time as always, man. How you doing today?
Joey!
I miss you on a pre and post game for the radio.
Oh, I miss you too. It's good to be missed. How you boys doing?
Doing fantastic. Joe, where are you?
I am in. Does it sound like I'm in a wind tunnel?
Yes.
Are you in Winnipeg?
Oh. No, I'm not in Winnipeg. Hold on a second.
Hold on, I'm getting blown away.
How's that? Any better?
It's better.
There you
yeah.
go.
I was.
Yeah, I'm at home. I'm at Lomar Sculptor Park in Sunset Hills with my dog.
Oh, I love that place. My daughters love that place.
It's not a bad park. There's like a big old deer and a big old tire, and I don't really quite get art. There's like this
So totally.
red tube configuration. That's like stacked up tubes, and I guess people call it art. I don't know how to look at art. I go to the art museum with my wife. My wife loves art. She loves Monet and all this stuff. And
Oh, yeah.
I'm looking at this, and she'll stare at a painting, and she'll stare there for like 5 minutes. I'm like, can we go get something to eat?
Dude,
what are you staring at?
Joey, I'm so glad you said this. Like, it's one thing that I just don't understand. And I'd love to be more cultured. Like, I'd love to understand it. I just don't. People look at art and it makes them feel things. Like, it makes me feel emotional
bored.
sometimes. I walk through an art gallery and it takes me 10 minutes. Like, I don't understand how people take time through those things. I just walk, see what's on the walls. Wow, that's beautiful. And I leave, and that's it. There's nothing more to it for me.
Yeah, I'm with you. Like, I don't want to feel anything. I want to feel a pepperoni pizza in my belly. That's what I want to feel. Let's get the heck out of here.
Do I got time to tell a great art story real quick?
Yeah, we got a minute.
Okay, Joe, real quick in a blender. 8th grade, I was on a field trip to Chicago. When we went to the art museum in Chicago, I had my headphones on. I was listening to my iPod. In the middle of a quiet art museum, an 8th grader screamed out really loud, "Look at all the boobs in here."
Ah!
Yeah.
See, that's the kind of art maybe I should be watching. Looking at.
Alex was listening to
Yeah.
Eminem.
Yeah.
And at an art gallery.
I don't go to art museums anymore because of that. A lot of awkward and angry stares, so I just don't go anymore.
I don't blame you.
All right, Joe. Something we're all going to be staring at tonight is our TVs as the St. Louis Blues, and we're going to be listening here on 101 ESPN as the Blues are
What the
back
hell,
in
man?
action against the Washington Capitals. It feels like a big game. Opportunity to win 3 games for the 3 games in a row for the first time this season. Capitals haven't lost 3 straight all season long, and that could potentially be on the line tonight. They're going with Joel Hofer in net. Are you surprised at all by the decision?
You know, I am and I'm not. You know, one thing I will say from the side of me that's like, oh, man, Bennington's been solid. You keep riding the horse. You need points right now. You got to keep building, keep the confident guy going. That's number one. I think that's instinctually people's reaction. But, you know, there's a plan. And one thing that this coaching staff wanted to establish is they got to get Hofer in there. They can't. There was a point in the stretch in the season, I think David Alexander said in October, where he sat for almost 2.5 weeks. And it wasn't good for Hofer. It wasn't good for Bennington. So they got to keep them on a little bit of a regulation, and they got to keep them in a way where Bennington's getting his breaks. Let's be honest. Last game, he won that game. You know, he allowed the 2 goals. One I don't think is his fault. Colton Brico kind of trips him up. But they probably saw something where, hey, this guy's looking a little tired, right? And we got to be proactive with this because 2 years ago, they weren't proactive. We had Thomas Price a couple 2 years ago, and they just rode that horse. And, boy, he got tired, and his team started to slouch. So they're trying to get ahead of it. They're trying to get Hofer in there to get Binnington rest, but also keep Hofer going because you're going to need both down the stretch here. And what an opportunity for Joe Hofer. I mean, they wanted to give him harder games this year. When he came into the league, he was getting the Blackhawks and the Blue Jackets and the Phoenix Coyotes at the time. But now he's getting some big games. He played the Florida Panthers this year. They wanted to get him in against the Jets. He's played the Jets multiple times. And now, of course, what an amazing test to go up against one of the greatest goal scorers of all time now, especially tonight.
So, Joe, on the playing side of things, Robert Thomas was on TMA this morning, and he talked about how, it's our job to force Doug Armstrong's hand to not sell off at the trade deadline. Can the Blues do anything to change the mindset of the front office in terms of how they approach the trade deadline?
Yeah, I think there's time. I do. I think that there is time. Next Friday there before the Ducks game is, of course, when it all kind of comes to a head. But listen, Alex, you win tonight. All of a sudden you got 3 in a row. Then you're, I believe, 2 over 500 at this point then. And then you move forward, and then you can take care of business there on Saturday night. You do have a couple LA Kings games coming up. I've always loved the way the Blues have played the Kings, 2 heavy teams. Maybe you win 2 of those. I know it sounds absolutely crazy, but maybe you go on a five-game run or 6-game run all up until Friday. I do. I think he's going to scratch his head a little bit. Now, I still think that there are some things that he automatically is going to do no matter what. That's where they're at the season. If he has a chance to get better and add a player, my goodness, go do it. But, if someone team really starts to elevate and take off, and then all of a sudden you win and you're in a good spot, this is the general manager who wants to stay competitive. He wants to go down to the very end. He wants to play beautiful games in late March and April. And to answer your question, I think there is a lot they can still do.
Joey, enjoy yourself in that wind tunnel, my friend. We look forward to hearing you on the call tonight. Blues versus the Capitals. We always look forward to your breakdowns of these games. We'll talk with you again next week, my man.
Hey, sounds good, boys. You guys enjoy your day.
Absolutely. That's Joey Vitale. Appreciate his time as always here on VK and Ferrario. Apologies for the wind there. I know it can be a little bit difficult sometimes. Hey, listen, this is the magic of live radio. You deal with the technology sometimes when you have that. It is what it is. Appreciate his breakdown as always. Alex, you agree with him. There's time, there's runway here for the Blues to be able to make a sway in the decision-making process for Doug Armstrong at the deadline.
Yeah, you've got what? You've got 4 games before the trade deadline. You put together a 4-game point streak on top of what you already done. That would be points, if I'm not mistaken, if you get points in the next 4, be points in 9 of your last 10 games. And let's say in those 4, you pick up 3 wins. You're talking about getting 5 wins in a 8-game span. That puts you in the position. You're in the position right now to where you look at it and you say, like, yeah, technically we don't have to sell. You're 4 points behind the Calgary Flames. Vancouver won last night, so they put themselves there. So you're 5 points behind them. Yes, those teams have games in hand on you. Yes, it's an uphill battle, but we're not talking about a 10 or 12-point difference. You've got to win. That's the problem here. You've got to win tonight. You need to win on Saturday or Sunday. You have to win one of those 2 games. And you're still within 3 points of this thing.
Somebody on the text line, I think they're teasing me from the 314. Guys, why does it matter what the team does? According to some, results aren't important. It's the process and how they get there that actually matters.
And you've liked the process lately, haven't you?
You've loved the process for 3 games.
I have. That's the thing.
So I'd say bye.
I need to be better at communicating this. It's on me, not on you. Because my job is to communicate. I do a poor job of it sometimes. My point on the process stuff and why I believe that it matters more is that I think that if you have a good process, you should end up with better results more often. The results should be a byproduct of a good process. It's why I love what Carolina does. The Carolina Hurricanes, the way that they play, that style, the process of playing that style should lead to good results over time. Now, there are individual games where it doesn't. It doesn't work for them, right? Every team in the NHL is going to lose, 20, 30 games in any given season. Same thing is true for Florida. The way that they play, the style that they play, the process that they go about there and play with, it should lead to positive results over time. There are individual games for them that it doesn't. The process is really good. If you go out there, though, and you're just sticking in front of the net the entire game and you're playing the suppressive style hockey, I don't know that that's necessarily a good process. Or when you're making bad decisions. Like, this was always my thing with Mike Matheny. Early in his career in St. Louis, he was the same manager that he ended up being in 2017. There was nothing different. What changed? The players, the personnel. When he's making decisions in 2013 that are confusing, but the player that he's selecting is still a really good reliever. There's like 2 good choices, but one's better. Well, the change in terms of the expected results there isn't all that great. But later on, when he had a good player and a below average player that he was choosing between, when he made a bad choice there, it really mattered for the Cardinals. So the good process led to better results more often. That's my point on the results versus the process. The process should lead to good results. And when you don't, it happens. But I would rather have that good process over time, because over time, it should be the thing that gets me the best results possible. Somebody on the text line said it's a results-based business. Yes, totally. The process is what gets you there. That's my point on this, and if you disagree with me, totally fair. In my opinion, the process of going to Hofer instead of Benner tonight, I don't know that I love it. We'll see if it ends up working out for them, though. Because the results do matter. Like, I get it.
Yeah, I just, what Joey said is just what I'll go off of, and I'll take David Alexander for his word. The reason you don't see Jordan Binnington a whole lot is they have to make sure that he's fresh. And if he's not going, they don't believe that he's 100%, and they don't want a.
Just don't, like, is tonight the game that's going to change it?
Yeah, I was going to say fresh.
Well, I think it's because
fresh for what, golf in April?
No, I think it's what Jim Montgomery said. With the amount of back-to-backs that you're going to have, you just don't want to fatigue Binnington.
One of them.
Well, I understand that, but you try and limit the amount of. You try and give them a little bit more rest before they play 8 games in 14 days at the end of the season, and by that, or at the end of March, like at that time, you are going to want a little more Jordan Binnington.
Doesn't matter if you don't win these ones. Like those games at the end of March, you could play half of them with Hofer,
but you don't win this one if Binnington's gassed in David Alexander's mind.
If he is truly gassed right now, he wouldn't have given you that performance over the last couple that he had. Like if he was gassed from the Four Nations faceoff, I think it's the opposite. I think he's locked in right now. And I'd let him run. Like this weekend, he was going to play one of the two, no matter what. There was no decision to be made there. I'd be shocked if he doesn't play next Wednesday against LA. So, like, those games were probably locked in prior to this decision. And then it's really just a question of, do you want him against Washington or not? Because it's the only decision to be made between now and next Friday night.
Yeah.
And then next Friday night and Saturday, you've got a back-to-back. So there's really no decision to be made there either. You're going to go 50-50 split there. One of them's going to start Friday. The other starts on Saturday. And then you are off until the following Thursday.
I think it's about the days off for him, though. Thursday, they played that Four Nations Championship. He had Friday, Saturday off. He played Sunday. Gave him Monday off. He played Tuesday. If you give him Wednesday off, he's playing tonight. Now you're talking about playing him more than what you've done in that regularly scheduled thing. You give him this one off. Now you're off Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. You play Saturday. I really think David Alexander, you heard Joe mention it, like, and I've heard this too, he focused so much at the beginning of the season scheduling out this goalie schedule so that Binnington was fresh.
And they got away from it early in the season. This is what I'm a little confused by. Like, I get it that they now look back at that as being a problem. Fair enough. But, like, there was a point in time between early November and late November where it went Benner, Hofer, Benner, Hofer, Benner.
And what was Benner's numbers in November? Because that was
have to look back.
That was when the team started to really struggle with Bannister. Like, to me, that screams desperation of we've got to start winning hockey games.
I'm with you.
They're
and
there
I wouldn't
now.
do that normally.
But look what happened when you went into that desperation mode. You lost Binnington.
But if I lose Binnington, then I know what we are at the deadline. We're sellers. Like right
exactly.
now, their playoffs. The playoffs
He was
start
great in November, by the way.
The playoffs start.
This is his best month of the year so far.
Playoffs start, I think, April 20th is like the expectation for when the playoffs start. No, the Blues playoffs start tonight. In fact, they started when the break started, when the second half of the season started. That was playoffs for the St. Louis Blues. They are in playoffs now, which means it should be Jordan Binnington that you ride or die with. And if he gets tired and he ends up not performing well, you know what? Guess what? We're sellers, and he can rest more in the second half.
I think they're viewing it, though, as like, look, yes, if we need this win, it's playoffs, but we also need multiple wins, and we've got to make sure that Jordan Binnington can do what he did against Winnipeg or did against Colorado and Seattle for the rest of this month.
It also shows a ton of confidence in Hofer. If I'm going to argue the other side, I would actually argue in favor of Hofer. I would say this tells you how they feel about him. They believe that he's a 1B, not a 2. Like if you're viewing him as being ready to go for this game and you don't mind not pushing Benner and you're cool with the load management here, it shows a ton of faith in Hofer. So, hey, credit to the kid, man. He's earned that from them, and now we'll see if it pays off for them tonight. Coming up next, 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line for a quick version of questions and answers here on BK and Ferrario.
I don't want to feel anything. I want to feel a pepperoni pizza in my belly. That's what I want to feel.
314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service X line for an abbreviated quick hitter version of questions and answers. Nick Kypreos of SportsNet joins us coming up here in about 5 minutes or so. From the 618, guys, how many starts at the AAA rotation before, Quinn Matthews is ready to be up at the major league level? I don't know that I've ever done that before, and I apologize.
I thought you were trying to make a statement or something.
Clearing of my throat into the microphone as loud as I could. I'm so sorry. How many starts at AAA before Quinn Matthews is ready? To restate that.
I think he'd be ready probably by like May. So what is that? Probably about 5-6 starts, you would imagine?
Yeah, somewhere in there.
But May would be the time that I'd look at and I'd say, okay, let's see what Matthews has got.
I think the answer could be 0. Like, I think he may not need any starts at AAA to prove that he's ready, right? Like, his stuff played the other day when he got the start against Toronto. My guess is, though, he's going to get like 10 to 15 at AAA, if not more than that, before he gets up to St. Louis.
314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line from the 314. Guys, would there be anyone in the St. Louis Blues organization that you would deem to be untouchable if Ottawa were to do the crazy decision and made Brady Tkachuk available?
Yeah, Robert Thomas, Colton Parayko.
I think that would
probably be it.
Yeah.
I'd agree with
I almost said Binnington, but I think in that scenario, I would probably say, yeah, you know what? I've got another goalie.
From the 314, guys, would you consider trading Jordan Kyrou to L.A. for Byfield and Clark? Quentin Byfield's a fun player, man.
Brant Clark is a really good defenseman, too, who has not gotten opportunities, and he's a right shot. He's essentially the equivalent of Philip Broberg on the right side. Yeah, I would consider that. Makes your team better now. Quentin Byfield is a legit number 2 centerman. Big dude down the middle, responsible defensively, and Brant Clark comes in. Your top 4 next year with Brant Clark would be Parayko, Clark, Broberg, and Fowler, and that's scary. And big. I think Brant Clark's like 6'2". So, yeah, I would probably do that.
I'm in. I'll do it, and I like Jordan Kyrou's
I don't know why the Kings would do that. That makes their team worse. But, yeah, sure.
I'd probably do it. I don't know enough about Clark to speak intelligently about it, but Byfield's a guy that I would be very, very interested in.
I'll tell you that they comped Brant Clark when he was drafted to Drew Doughty.
Okay, yeah, I'll do it. Let's do that. I'm in. You didn't have to do anything more. Yeah. With Alex and T-Bone on BK coming up next, we're going to talk to Nick Kypreos, former NHL forward. You might remember him as Blues fan. He's now an insider for Sportsnet. He co-hosts the afternoon show on 590 up in Toronto. He's been talking a lot about the Braden Shin situation from the Maple Leafs perspective. He joins us next here on 101 ESPN. We've been talking a lot about the speculation because the Toronto Maple Leafs always seem to be connected in some way, shape, or form to the St. Louis Blues. At times, it's been Colton Parayko. In the past, it's been Jordan Binnington. And now their head coach is Craig Berube. And so, of course, they are connected to the Blues captain in Braden Shin. They need a second or third line center. Shin is potentially available on the market. And somebody that has been talking a lot about this, including on his latest trade board, is Nick Kypreos. You can find his work over at Sportsnet. You can also hear him on 590 The Fan up in Toronto. He's a part of their afternoon show. He joins us now via the Callier and Thompson hotline. Nick, we appreciate the time, man. Let's start with the obvious here, and that is Braden Shin. What is your understanding of where the St. Louis Blues are at in regards to their captain and how they are currently viewing this year's NHL trade deadline?
Well, first of all, good afternoon, guys. This is always this time of year where we look around the National Hockey League with wants and needs, and certainly it takes two teams to be motivated for different reasons to get a deal done. I look at the St. Louis Blues in a transition period with Doug Armstrong, soon welcoming in Alex Steen as the general manager, and what he could do to change the outlook of a few short years here as St. Louis moves on. So not looking at anything like a fire sale here, but if he can tweak some of the salary cap out with some large numbers, he's going to try to do it. And right now, with the wants and needs of the Toronto Maple Leafs, particularly at center ice, Braden Shin does become a name that pops up a lot now this time of year. And, the tricky part again for the Leafs would be the fact that Braden has $6.5 million left on his AAV for the next 3 seasons. And if, in fact, the Leafs can fit that through. Doug Armstrong is not a guy that likes to hold on to money and retain for teams. I would imagine if the Leafs were able to find room for Braden, they'd have to do it with every single dollar that's on the contract. And until we hear differently, that seems to be the focus of the Leafs is trying to find that room right now.
Nick, if Toronto were to entertain this and say, like, look, we need to go out there and get that upgrade, Shen makes us closer to being a cup contender, what makes sense for Toronto to give up to acquire Braden Shen?
Well, I don't know if it's a roster player that would be a make or break, situation for Doug Armstrong. At times we've seen these type of players be available at a cost of a first-round pick, a blue-chip prospect, or multiple prospects. I think St. Louis is in a position, guys, where they don't have to necessarily strip this thing down the next 2 or 3 years and look at a 5-year rebuild here. I think the Washington Capitals did a lot of teams a favor, including St. Louis, and that's shown the path of making some changes in a short period of time and being able to compete again for a Stanley Cup. So I probably would think in a perfect world, if I'm Doug Armstrong right now, I'm looking at a younger roster player that I'd like to pull out of Toronto. And right now the Leafs don't have a ton of them. Whether or not they're in the market for Shen or anyone else of significance, people are going to turn around and they're going to talk to them about Matthew Nyes. Yes, he's got some blue chip prospects in junior hockey right now and in the American Hockey League, but I don't know if it'll be enough for Doug Armstrong here if he holds tight on bringing back something significant that can come into St. Louis's lineup right now. Outside of Bobby McMahon and Matthew Nyes, it's going to be difficult for the Leafs.
We're talking to Nick Kypreos here on 101 ESPN. You can find his great work over at Sportsnet. That's where his latest trade board is available for you. You can also hear him talking up in Toronto on 590 The Fan. Nick, when you guys talk in Toronto about the Maple Leafs prospects, specifically Cowan, and then Minton as well,
yes.
How do you guys view them as Maple Leafs fan or media covering the team? It's something that, locally we can view them one way and then nationally maybe they're viewed another. But for you guys, how do you view them right now and their projection at the NHL level?
Well, if the Toronto media is guilty for anything, at times it could be for overhyping the prospects, and it just seems every year there's one or two that the media falls in love with. Easton Cowan was one of those guys, I think, in a very short while, where he came in, had a good training camp, went back to junior with the Hunters in London, and has been a scoring threat ever since. Minton's another guy that he came in early, played some early games for the Leafs, and again was thought about as a great 200-foot future centerman for the Toronto Maple Leafs. But outside of these two guys, it does drop off significantly. At times, it's the overhype can kind of get yourself in trouble too, because it's tough to live up to it. Nick Robertson's a guy that's presently in the Maple Leaf on the Maple Leaf roster right now. When he came out of Peterborough a few years ago, he was like a can't-miss scoring star for the Leafs, and he's had trouble maintaining a solid roster position all season long, although he's scoring lately. Is that enough for Doug Armstrong to revisit a Nick Robertson? I'm not too sure yet. But again, you're going to have to give up something of significance to land a Shen or anyone else around the league that can come in and perhaps be a difference maker between losing in the first round or getting to a Stanley Cup final. So it'll be fun watching this thing play out in the next week.
All right, that's what I wanted to follow up with you on, Nick, because this is a team, I mean, you know this as well as anybody. The Toronto Maple Leafs need to go on a run this year. Mitch Marner, the future is uncertain there. They're ready to go for this postseason run potentially. What is their level of desperation? Because that's typically what makes these kinds of deals happen, is when you've got one team that is a buyer at the deadline that doesn't just want to get something done, but almost feels the need to go out and make this specific move happen. So based on your understanding, your reporting, or just your feel around the team, what is the level of desperation right now for the Toronto Maple Leafs making a move like this happen?
Well, let's just start with their president, Brendan Shanahan, and you guys know him well, obviously, as a great player, Hall of Famer, many great years in St. Louis. He's been now with the Leafs in an executive position for 10 years. So as far as this being the year, this is the year that Brendan has to push this team to a conference final or a Stanley Cup final. On a scale of 1 to 10, I put it at an 11, right? So I think he's had plenty of opportunities over the years to put a team together that could really push for a Stanley Cup. It hasn't happened yet. And I got to think out of all the years that he's been behind the wheel here for the Maple Leafs, this is the year that will matter the most for him moving forward. So I say that in and itself, it will be let's buckle down and do whatever we can to get over the finish line here between now and the trade deadline. So I expect a big push from the Toronto Maple Leafs. I don't expect them to sit back and just pick around the edges here. I think they got to dive right into it.
Nick, I want to go back to something you said talking about, the Washington Capitals kind of painted a perfect picture of how you don't have to blow it up to turn this thing around. When you look at what the Capitals did from last year to this year, do you believe that the Blues can pull off something like that? And what would that look like for them to do it?
Yeah. The answer is yes. I don't mind a lot of those pieces moving forward here. And I absolutely loved the offer sheet for Broberg and Holloway here. And I'm going to say, guys, that perhaps Doug Armstrong may have carried something for future general managers to think about every year moving forward is the offer sheet on restricted free agents. I think that's a tremendous way to go moving forward here, but you've got to make sure that you have the cap space to do it. And I think that's why Doug Armstrong would be open to moving more money out Jordan Kyrou does not have any protection, I think, until next season or July, if I'm not mistaken, on his long-term deal. I'm not here to suggest to you that he's going to move Jordan Kyrou between now and Friday, but it all depends on what's out there and what's being offered. But if he can free up a little bit more money, I think we're going to start seeing more offer sheets, maybe not necessarily as early as this summer for Doug Armstrong in St. Louis, but for other teams in particular. But it takes freeing up a little bit of money to do that. And we know Washington was able to do that when they were able to trade for Pierre-Luc Dubois. That was a major move by Washington to have the ability to pick up that whole contract from Los Angeles. So these are the things that Doug Armstrong is looking at moving forward here, and he's got a few different options. The blue line, he's going to have to free some money up. Who is that? Parayko, Falk. We know Krug was a guy that had to, he's not playing right now, but, he tried real hard to get his money off the board, and it didn't happen. But he's looking at a number of options right now to move some money out.
All right, Nick. So you say it's an 11 out of 10 in terms of the need to go on a run this year for Brendan Shanahan. My co-host Alex has been saying over the last few weeks, hey, listen, I don't know that they'll do it, but the guy you've got to at least try to get if you're Doug Armstrong in any kind of a move with the Toronto Maple Leafs is Matthew Knies. You know everything that there is to know about him. You've watched him up there in Toronto. He's 21 goals this year. Really good young player. He's an RFA after the season. The Maple Leafs are up against it when it comes to their cap, and they've got other moves that they'd like to make. And you just mentioned, hey, maybe Doug Armstrong laid out the gauntlet on what other general managers could do in the future. There's no way that the Toronto Maple Leafs would trade Matthew Knies this year at the deadline, right?
Again, how desperate are you if it's an 11 out of 10 and you're Brendan Shanahan? He needs to go deep in the playoffs here. I'm not sure if he's going to be around as the president of the Toronto Maple Leafs if they lose in their first round. That's the state of where the team is right now, that it is a major fork in the road for Brendan Shanahan as well as anybody in the organization moving forward. And if there's an offer that bodes well for the Toronto Maple Leafs, I think, to go in a deeper run, and it's, Shen, I'm not sure Matthew Knies would do it for 33-year-old Braden Shen, but Matthew Knies could do it to Carolina for Rantanen if you were able to sign Rantanen into a long-term deal at age 27. So that one may make more sense for the Toronto Maple Leafs. They don't want to trade Matthew Knies, but Matthew Knies is less, he's less in a position now to help you win a Stanley Cup today than he would be in 3 or 4 years as he matures and gets better. And right now, the Leafs need now. They don't need 3 and 4 years. That's why I'm not saying that it would be my first choice to move Matthew Knies out, but to get something of significance and still protect yourself for the next 3, 4, or 5 years, you have to look at maybe moving Matthew Knies for that guy. I'm not sure Brendan Shen will do that out of St. Louis, but it could be for a younger player that could help you now, especially Brendan Shanahan. Help you now.
Nick, final one for me, and we always appreciate the time. You mentioned in your piece also a guy at the LA Kings organization in Quentin Byfield, and I am curious what you're hearing on that side, because somebody brought up the possibility of, do the Kings look at trading a Byfield or maybe one of their younger defensemen, Brant Clark, to try and upgrade on the wing side of the position?
Yeah, I see those as long shots as well here. I'm not here to tell you that the LA Kings are aggressively shopping either one of them. But there's a bit of a fork in the road for the LA Kings, who the last 3 or 4 years have been getting knocked out in the first round. So they're looking at different options. The problem is for LA is that when teams call and they're looking, to do something, the only ones that really attract are those type of players that you just mentioned, like Clark and Byfield. And, Byfield isn't having the greatest season, but he had a big night against Vegas the other night. And he's the one that's being asked for, and he's the one that doesn't have any trade protection. I don't expect the LA Kings to take the bat completely off their shoulders and swing for the fences here between now and Friday. But I was comfortable enough to put Byfield on the list only because teams keep asking about him. And by chance that the stars align, there might be a possibility where they would move him. But, I'd probably classify it as highly unlikely. But, this time of the year, we're not telling you. I didn't do the list to tell you what's going to happen. I'm just telling you what I'm hearing.
Nick, we appreciate the time, man. We really do. I know this is a crazy busy time for you guys, especially up in Toronto, where it's the only story that matters currently. So we wish you all the best. Hopefully, we'll be talking with you after the deadline, especially if something gets done between the Blues and the Maple Leafs.
Yeah, you know what? I know it's a nerve-wracking. I've lived it as a player this time of year, but for fans and people who are pushing for their team to get better, it is a fun time of the year, and I do appreciate you having me on today, guys. Thank you.
Thanks, Nick. As Nick Kypreos, former NHLer, now with Sportsnet. You can find his great work over at Sportsnet's website, and you can hear him on Sportsnet's afternoon show in Toronto, Sportsnet 590, The Fan. All right, there's a lot to get into there, including after hearing that conversation with Nick Kypreos and really reading everything that's out there, all of the other interviews, and we've got plenty more for you coming up. I think next week we're going to be joined actually by Nick Kypreos'
partner,
afternoon co-host, in Justin Bourne. But we're going to have plenty more coverage for you guys. I think I know what the play is here for Doug Armstrong. I think it's pretty simple, and I think I might have to say Alex was right. We'll talk about that next here on 101 ESPN.
As far as this being the year, this is the year that Brendan has to push this team to a conference final or a Stanley Cup final. On a scale of 1 to 10, I put it at an 11. He's had plenty of opportunities over the years to put a team together that could really push for a Stanley Cup. It hasn't happened yet.
All right, that was Nick Kypreos on with us just a little bit ago. If you guys want to get involved to the show, 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line to do so. Some breaking news, by the way, in the NFL that we'll get to in the next segment. It has been official now. It sounds like Travis Kelce's going to be back for the 2025 season. He texted that, of course, as one does, to Pat McAfee, who then said it on the air.
I thought Taylor texted.
Sure, yeah.
Said, he's back.
Travis Kelce says he's coming back. We'll get into that in the next segment. Alex, I found that to be interesting because that's really what matters here. Forget and set aside what makes sense. Set aside what is rational. Set aside whether or not like somebody should do this. If you are in a situation where it becomes an emotional decision and you say, I have to do this or I'm getting fired, that is when bad decisions are made, Alex.
Yep.
You look this offseason for the NFL. You know what's a really bad situation? The New York Giants. You know what they might do this offseason? Anything possible to keep their jobs. They are in self-preservation mode. And so if that means they go out and for no really good reason end up trading for Kirk Cousins, hey, man, we got to save our jobs, and this might be the thing that ends up allowing us to save our jobs. Or trading for a guy like Matt Stafford when they clearly do not have a team around him. That would make sense for him. That's what you do. So I bring this up and bring it full circle to the Blues because of this. If the Toronto Maple Leafs are truly desperate and you're Doug Armstrong, tighten the screws. Just keep tightening those screws. And just keep tightening those screws. Just wait. All you got to do right now, because we've said it ourselves, hey, the Blues are in a situation where they could be this year's raise of the trade deadline. Why? Dude, nothing's available. You want somebody that actually changes your projection in the postseason? Good luck. You can wait for Mikko Rantanen. I'm not convinced that the Carolina Hurricanes are going to trade him. I bet you they don't.
I don't think they can. And not to get sidetracked here, but if Carolina trades Mikko Rantanen, why would another team have the incentive to give you their best prospect when Rantanen's going to the free agent market?
It seems like the next best center available on the market is Scott Laughton.
Or Brock Nelson with the Islanders.
Sure. With all due respect to Scott Laughton, that dude is not in the same category as Braden Shen, and you can say that even if you're not a huge fan of where Braden Shen's at this point in his career. So if you're the Maple Leafs and you truly want to change the look, the complexion of your middle six, Shen's the guy. If you're Doug Armstrong, you wait, and say, I'm not saying yes until you include Matthew Nice. And if you don't include Matthew Nice, cool, I'll keep my captain.
Yep.
It's your choice. You're the one that's desperate. I'm not desperate right now. I'll keep Braden Shen and be happy with a $6.5 million player with a cap going up the way that it is. He's effectively what I was previously paying Brandon Saad, who, by the way, just gave us the money back. So we just can use his cap spot for Braden Shen now. Cool, yeah, we're fine. We've got no reason why we need to be urgently getting rid of Braden Shen. You guys are the one with urgency. So if you want him, cool. There's one player on your roster that we're interested in. His name's Matthew Nice, and until you include him, there's nothing for us to discuss. That's my approach if I'm Doug Armstrong at this year's deadline.
And let's also take the other incentive into all of this of why Toronto or why the Blues should say, no, not going to budge on this. You give me Matthew Nice. Toronto has Matthew Nice as an RFA. And guess what happens with RFAs, guys? Offer sheets. And guess what? They don't have. They have $31 million available to them with a cap spike. They have 7 forwards and 5 defensemen under contract. Marner needs a new deal, which is probably going to be around $12 million. Tavares is probably going to be around $5 or $6 million. Now you're talking about operating with $13 million. And if I'm Matthew Nice, yeah, you're going to give me a pretty nice contract. Another team could swoop in and say, we'll give you 5 years, or we'll give you $5 million per year.
And by the way, the Blues can't do that right now. Because of their cap situation, or because of their draft pick compensation situation.
Next year, though, they have the cap or the draft picks.
They don't have a second-round pick for the next 3 seasons. The Blues don't have a second to be able to play with in these spots the way that they did this past offseason.
But they have the 3rd, the 4th, and the 1st.
But that's not going to be enough money.
But you acquire the second-round draft pick at the draft like you did with Kevin Hayes.
But it has to be your own. Like, so you're going to have to really do some changes.
And I don't even know where that pick went, to be honest. Did that go to Pittsburgh when they traded Kevin Hayes? Was it 2026?
They've pushed
current
forward.
Third, they pushed it another year to get that pick back.
Now, I don't know what the compensation is, like, because there's a certain money where you give up first-round picks. Regardless, that's what Toronto, and it may not even be the Blues. Toronto's got to keep in the back of their mind, somebody could offer sheet Matthew Nice.
My point is, if you're the Blues, this is our chance to get him.
Yeah, well, and to go to the desperation, and this was my argument when we had this conversation a while back when I brought this potential idea up. Go back to when the Calgary Flames in 1995 had one of the best prospects in hockey, Jarome Iginla. And that year, the Dallas Stars said, we feel like we can win a Stanley Cup. And they said, you know what, we need to get better now. And they traded for a 31-year-old Joe Nieuwendyk who had scored 21 goals in 46 games for the Calgary Flames. And they said, we need to get better now. And what did they do? They traded for Joe Nieuwendyk. And they traded Jarome Iginla because they said, we need to get desperate. They won a cup 3 years later with Joe Nieuwendyk on that roster. Another one for you, the Boston Bruins. Toronto was a part of this deal. Toronto was desperate to have a defenseman, a top pair defenseman. They traded Tomas Kaberle. Boston was desperate for a defenseman to try and win the Stanley Cup. They traded Toronto Tomas Kaberle. They traded a first-round draft pick and one of their top prospects who had just played in the NHL, Joe Colburn, to get that defenseman. Boston won the Stanley Cup that year, and they traded away some really good pieces for it. I'm not saying it's a guaranteed. Frankly, I think Toronto's probably laughing at that, saying, no, I'm not going to give you Matthew Nyes. But like you just mentioned.
That's my initial response. When we did this and I was looking at it rationally, I was like, that's stupid.
Yeah.
And I think it would be. If the Blues are able to get Matthew Nyes in return for Braden Shin, to use the words of Darren Dreger, that is a true mammoth return.
Yeah.
It is the kind of return that nationally people will look at and say, that is a desperate trade and you gave up way too much. Mm-hmm. And yet, you know what matters? If that team makes it to the Eastern Conference Finals and then potentially gets to the Stanley Cup, it's all worth it.
Yep. And if you're them, if you're the Blues, like you said, you tighten the screws. You wait for them because go ahead and look for the market. Go ahead and find out what else you want out there because all those better names are going to cost you Matthew Nyes plus. And honestly, the Blues could look at this like Nick mentioned in terms of being a team that could eat some salary. They could look at this and say, hey, we'll take Max Domi off your hands. You give us Matthew Nyes, we'll take a Max Domi, we'll give you Braden Shannon, maybe another player. I don't know if it gets done, but desperate teams need to make that next step. Toronto cannot lose in the first round this year. If they do, they're not only potentially going to have Brendan Shanahan gone, they're going to potentially lose Mitch Marner, potentially lose John Tavares. Their roster could look completely different next year. You got to take the next step.
Somebody on the text line, just to go back to the offer sheet thing real quick. Offer sheets between $4.5 and $6.5 million cost a first and a third. Blues could definitely do that. I think right now they don't have a third either.
Yeah, they do.
Technically,
they do.
They do have a third? Okay. Are you sure on that?
Yeah, Puckpedia says they've got a third. Now, I don't know if that's their third or if that's another team's third, but they have a third-round pick. Huh. Yeah, third-round pick. It's their own pick in 2026.
2025.
No, because they would be offer sheeting them in the offseason, and it would be 2026 draft picks.
Oh, good call. Yeah, there you go. Okay, my bad.
So they have the first and the third next year.
Regardless, admit defeat on that one.
And that's how you do bend them over because they can't do anything.
I'm not doing that for Matthew Nyes. I'm not giving up a first and a third round pick for Matthew Nyes. That's not the kind of player that I'm looking at for that kind of a return. If you made your first and third round pick available across the league and you included a prospect in it as well, dude, you could get some really good players. Like really good players available for you. More so, in my opinion, than Matthew Nyes on that kind of a deal where you're paying him $6+ million potentially to be a part of the Blues. The time when you do this is now.
You said it was 4.5 to 6.5 or 6.5 plus?
4.5 to 6.8, and typically the way that you'd go about it is you kind of try to get up to the top end of that to make it more likely that they sign with you.
But the team's in a bad cap space, so $5 million may get it done.
Sure. I'm not sure that I'm not paying Matthew Nyes, I don't think at least, $5 million plus giving up a first and a third round pick for the rights to that player. I would rather just go out and make those picks available for a either cheaper or better player. Regardless, Matthew Nyes is now the thing that you're trying to acquire. This is not a conversation about what happens in July, what happens then. We can have those conversations then. It's about, do you trade Braden Shin? And if so, what is your line? Somebody else on the text line brought up their prospects. Dude, prospects, I just don't know if they matter that much to you right now. You've got a boatload of prospects, so much so that we're looking at them and saying, where is the spot for all of these guys now? Like, if they take somebody in the first round this year, you start to wonder, all right, how do they fit into this mix? Like, who are you trading out? What you need right now is ready-made NHLers. Guys that can come in and aren't just masquerading as top six players, but are legit top six forwards at the NHL level today. Not something that's helping you 3 years down the road.
I mean, I've kind of changed my opinion on this because for a while there I was thinking it's like, hey, you know what, you just move on from a Braden Shen because it opens up the money, you get a really good prospect in return, and then who knows what happens. I'm no longer there. an Easton Cowan, a Fraser Minton, that does nothing for me. It doesn't make me a better team next year. Frankly, you're in the same spot, if not a worse spot, because you don't know what the centerman looks like. If I'm trading Braden Shen, I'm getting something that's playing on my team next year, guaranteed, potentially in my top 6. And if I'm not, guess what? I'm keeping Braden Shen.
Exactly.
My team has still got a shot next year if I make additions elsewhere. And I know people will look at this and say, well, open up the salary cap space and go after the free agents. Guys, that is a two-way street. You can want Mikko Rantanen all you want and be willing to give him $14 million. He's got to want to come to St. Louis. Mitch Marner's got to want to come to St. Louis. So I'm making the moves via trade, and I'm going to stand firm in the fact that if you will give me something that makes my team better next year, otherwise I'm keeping Braden Shen.
Somebody on the text line said, guys, I understand what you're saying here, but I just can't see Toronto giving up roster players during a potential playoff run. I'm with you. I don't see it either. I don't think they will do this, if I had to guess. But when you are in a spot as a GM, president of hockey operations, or the president of the teams, and your job is potentially on the line depending on what happens in the playoffs, and you see, okay, on one side I've got a 22-year-old kid that I think is a pretty good player that can score 25 to 30 goals for us this year and will help us in the playoffs, and on the other side is Braden Shen, who is a proven playoff performer, and our biggest need is down the middle, and we've got goal scorers littered up and down this lineup. We need grit. We need that guy in the middle of our lineup. If they say this is the answer to our playoff problems, whether they are right or wrong on that doesn't matter. And frankly, if you're Doug Armstrong, you don't care whether or not they're correct on that assessment. You just need them to have that assessment of the player. That's when you do desperate things.
Yeah.
And that is when you do things that people like Alex and T-Bone and myself and you listening right now think are stupid. And you end up making a potential huge mistake. But if it ends up getting you to the Stanley Cup final, there's not going to be a single person in Toronto that gives a whoop. What happens down the road with Matthew Nyes, just like here in St. Louis, you don't care that Tage Thompson became a really good player for the Buffalo Sabres. Zero cares in the world. It was worth it, even if he became the next, I don't know, Connor McDavid. Why? Because for the first time in Stanley Cup, or first time in franchise history, you got to hoist that Stanley Cup over your head.
Yep. And the standards
made it worth it.
And the standards are so low for Toronto. I don't even know if fans would deem that a success if they I don't know if the success is stated as we got to win a Stanley Cup for this trade to be a success. They'd view it as a success if they got to the conference final, because this team hasn't been there since the 2001-2002 season. You do some wild stuff when your job is on the line, which is why I'm just not I don't think it's that crazy to consider if Toronto's willing to do it. It just comes down to, is somebody else willing to give Toronto what they want without having to give up Matthew Nyes? All
right, he's Alex, that's T-Bone, I'm BK. If you guys missed our conversation with Nick Kypreos, highly recommend checking out on the podcast page today. 101ESPN.com and the free 101 ESPN app is where you go to find it. It's all presented by
Schaefer Door Company.
We will certainly be talking plenty more Blues throughout the show as we take you up until 2 o'clock. But coming up next, big news in the NFL with some NFL quick hitters here on 101 ESPN.
Tanner Hendrickson here with a Sports Center update brought to you by Saliga Heating and Cooling. Cardinals currently in spring training action as they are taking on the Miami Marlins, and they are on top 4-0 in the top of the second inning thanks to a 3-run home run by Nolan Arenado. Andre Palante is getting the start for St. Louis in today's game. And the Blues will be back in action tonight as they visit the Washington Capitals. Joel Hofer will be getting the start in between the pipes. We'll have pregame coverage starting at 5 o'clock with Alex Ferrario, then puck drop at 6. The Sports Update is brought to you by Saliga Heating and Cooling, independent American Standard heating and air conditioning dealer.
All right, Alex, anytime there's a local story, I feel like we got to go with that over the national headline. So we'll start with this. T-Bone made us aware of this during the break. As UFL training camp approaches, tensions are rising as bargaining discussions between the league and the players' union have been far from ideal. This is coming from James Larson on Twitter, who covers the UFL. He says all 24 quarterbacks from across the UFL chose not to attend a quarterback minicamp earlier this week in protest. Here is part of their letter that they sent this week to the league executives. Quote, "We've been paying close attention to this offseason's CBA negotiations. The proposal our Players Association received on Thursday was, quote, unacceptable and insulting, end quote. We, all of the quarterbacks of the UFL, have collectively decided not to attend the UFL quarterback training camp this weekend in Arlington, Texas, in protest of that proposal and the message it sent to us as players," end quote. Not sure where this is going to go. Hopefully there is not a league stoppage as fans of this league, but it feels like that is at least in play based on what is taking place right now. Yeah, Anthony Beck just tweeted out, "Let's go STL. We need you. Home opener on April 6th. Pack the dome." Timing could have been better.
Do the players know that, though?
Felt kind of weird.
Yeah, the players know that one, though.
Literally 6 seconds ago, we just tweeted that out.
Well, this is awkward.
Yeah, that's the latest on the UFL.
No bueno, Brandon.
It's not what you want.
UFL definitely. Of all sports that cannot afford a work stoppage, UFL's up there.
I think work stoppage means league stoppage.
Oh, sorry. A player strike or a work stoppage, either one.
I think that
Whatever
one
it
means
is.
it's pretty much over.
All right. On the NFL side of things, the big news today comes from the Pat McAfee show. He said he reached out to a source on the future of Travis Kelce. That source said, quote, "I'm coming back for sure."
Wait,
it's Travis Kelce.
I think I know who the source is.
Yeah, I was going to
Kelce
say.
added, "I'm going to get in the best shape of my life this offseason. I've got a real bad taste in my mouth with how I played in that final game. I can't go out like that," end quote. Alex, I'm kind of two minds on this. And this is coming from a place as a fan, right? I want your guys' opinion on this as neutral observers. As a fan, I'm of two minds. One, man, Travis Kelce coming back is really cool. It's kind of like you guys watching Waino in his final season here in St. Louis. As a fan of him and this team, watching him go from this super immature guy that was hurt his first year in the NFL to becoming one of the greatest tight ends of all time, who was a legit team leader on the roster and one of the most trusted voices that I can remember in that locker room. It's really cool to have him back this upcoming season. That being said, I had allowed my mind to go to a place where he wasn't going to be on the team potentially, and they were going to have that $18 million, I think it is, to use cap-wise elsewhere. And it did make me wonder, is this, given that money, the best thing for the Kansas City Chiefs? And I don't know what the answer to that question is, but as a fan, I'm really excited for Travis Kelce to be back. I think the game's better with him in it. What do you think of this news?
Yeah, I think it makes sense if you're Travis Kelce. Anytime a player to his level is motivated is always a good thing for the team that he's returning to. So this is good for the Kansas City Chiefs for the now. I do understand your side of it, though, because like from a Kansas City Chiefs fan perspective, it wasn't the greatest year from Travis Kelce, and you're probably thinking, man, like, would it be better for this team to go spend money in a different area? Noah Gray was really good last year for them. Does he kind of emerge as somebody that you could take the next level with and go spend the Travis Kelce money elsewhere? But for me, when you got a Hall of Famer on your team, even if he's older, if he's motivated, I'll take my shot with that guy.
I also wonder if they're going to be able to change the cap a little bit. Like maybe they can manipulate things the way that the Eagles do with the void years or whatever. There's possible ways that you can get around this, but that's one other thought that came to mind for me. He's typically been good about helping out the Chiefs in that regard.
Yeah, because right now, I think he'd be the highest paid tight end in football, which no offense to Travis, that he's not that guy anymore. And if that's a bit of an overpay by the Kansas City Chiefs,
sure.
he doesn't make you worse. Like, you're not going to end up becoming a bad football team because he's on the field. You could become a better football team without the $18 million counting against the cap. So, though the game is better with him in it, he is clearly on the decline, and the Chiefs probably would have been better off had he retired.
All right, next thing up here, as we go through some NFL quick hitters here in BK and Ferrario. Alex, yesterday I saw a lot of buzz about the Colts and what they're doing at the quarterback position. And you know this is near and dear to my heart because I was all in on Anthony Richardson.
Because of you, I drafted him in our fantasy league and stunk.
I'm sorry. I apologize. There
You
were a
listened to
couple of
this
really
guy?
great games. You just never knew when they were coming, and it could go from 27 points to 5 points overnight.
Yeah,
his fantasy football has not been
it
good.
wasn't him but like I kind of convinced myself that I hear him talk like, yeah, there could be a ceiling for him, and if that's the case,
Anthony Richardson, the hope
could
was
be a
that he
solid guy.
becomes what, like a Jalen Hurts was. He's more running
that's
than
solid
throwing.
for fantasy,
And it's
especially
great for
fantasy.
fantasy.
Football.
It's great for fantasy, even if it stinks in the NFL. That was my thought, at least.
And then I cut him.
The Colts have told everybody that will listen, we are bringing in legitimate competition for Anthony Richardson for the starting quarterback position this upcoming season. I don't know what that looks like. Maybe to them they're saying like, hey, we're gonna go out there and we're gonna bring in
Jameis Winston,
Jimmy Garoppolo, right? Like something
that's
like
our
that.
starting
The
quarterback.
veteran backup that's around the league for a decade. I think that the Colts should trade Anthony Richardson. I think it's time. It's very clear this is not working for either side. He, for whatever reason, needs a kick in the ass, and it seems like he's not the leader. I don't know that it's going to work for him there. He seemingly needs a new fresh start. They don't believe in him, and that's been clear at every turn, including when they benched him mid-season. He asked out of a football game. It's tough to win your teammates back over when you've done that. I think it's time. If you were the Steelers, would you trade a third-round pick for Anthony Richardson?
Hell yeah. I would, especially with Mike Tomlin as my head coach. Absolutely. If I'm the Colts, I don't know if I could do that though.
How come?
Who are you bringing in to make your team competitive then next year?
I mean, the alternative is sticking with Anthony Richardson,
Totally, but-
and I don't think that's going to go well either.
Totally, but you're setting your organization back 3 years. I mean, you invested
back.
you invested a high pick on this.
Yeah, and it didn't work. Like sometimes you just have to admit defeat. And to me, if I'm them, and this is the way that I'm talking about him in the offseason, in my opinion, if you truly believe in him, you have got to be, hey, we believe Anthony Richardson is the guy. There's no reason for us to bring in competition. Just spread the gospel of Anthony Richardson, even if you don't believe it.
Yeah.
Just say everything publicly that supports the guy, so at least the players on the team know, hey, they're all in on this guy. He's going to be our quarterback next year. They're doing the opposite. They're cutting his knees or legs out from underneath him at every turn possible. I don't think it can possibly work there. They're the 14th overall selection, so it's not as though they can get a quarterback in this year's draft.
You have to be signing Sam Darnold, finding a way to get Matt Stafford on your team if you're going to do that, because you have
Why not
to
take a step back, though? At some point, don't they have to do something where it's like, you know what, we're going to go and get like Russell Wilson or Justin Fields or somebody like that and just understand that we're not going to have our quarterback this year?
That would be the move, but man, good luck selling your fan base on that one.
They can't sell their fan base on this.
Yeah.
If I'm a Colts fan, why am I believing in Anthony Richardson right now?
You'd be talking about just cleaning house then there, because I'm not going to trust a team to be bad this year to get a top pick and then maroon it again with who they draft.
I think that should be the plan, and this goes back to the ownership stuff, but man, if I'm the owner there, I'm saying it's a transition year. Yeah, Chris Ballard's in charge. He'll bring in the players for this upcoming season, and Shane Steichen, I think Shane Steichen's a good coach, but I think Chris Ballard should be fired. I think he should have been fired after last year.
Isn't Joe Flacco on that team?
I don't think so.
He's a free agent.
Oh, so we'll run it back with Joe Flacco then, man.
Sure.
Yeah.
This would be my route. And if I'm the Steelers, by the way, I think this is ideal. Don't go out there and get Russell Wilson or Aaron Rodgers or anything like that. If you want to get Matt Stafford, I get that. But Anthony Richardson might be good. I don't think he's going to be, but at least you give yourself the upside of him being a good quarterback for the next decade with you. And doesn't he kind of feel like a Steeler? Cannon of an arm, can help you in the running game. Like, he plays the way that Arthur Smith wants to play stylistically. I think it makes sense for everybody involved.
And if I'm Mike Tomlin, that's exactly who I'm going to go get, because everybody that just shutting this guy down, saying he doesn't have it anymore and he's not a leader.
Totally.
Cool, I'll bring the guy in that nobody believes in, because I can do that.
From the Colts perspective, I would be trading Anthony Richardson. I would be entering the rebuild. You mentioned at some point you got to just cut ties. Do what San Francisco did when they're like, Trey Lance, not the guy. Time to move on.
Bingo.
And they traded him to Dallas for a 2024 fourth-round pick. The Steelers one, though, like, I don't know if I like the Steelers going out and getting Anthony Richardson. It's time for them. I get what they would be trying to do. To me, that feels just like what they tried with Fields,
Well, what's
which
the
is we're going to
alternative?
take a distressed asset. To me, they should be in on the Stafford one. Like, if Stafford is available,
I
they should
agree.
be all in on that.
I think
If
all of
not,
us
to
in
me,
this room
they
are in
need to go
agreement.
to a rebuild. I think the Steelers have been playing in purgatory, being stuck in the middle with Mike Tomlin.
So then
They've
what does
got
that
to
look
tear
like?
that thing apart.
Because I think Richardson might be a rebuild. That's my thing is if you give up a third-round pick, it's not like it's that big of an asset. And it could go one of two ways. Either it hits and you've got your quarterback for the next decade. Or maybe the more likely route, he stinks, he's not good, and now you're doing what you're saying right now. So I think it also gives you that opportunity to just be bad for a year, and we live with the results of that, and next year we get a top 5 pick, and we take whoever the best quarterback is that's available.
He's just not the guy for me. Like, the Fields one, I understood. Like, I thought there was still some in Fields. You had seen him play really well for more than just, like, 3 games, and he didn't run the YOLO offense like Richardson does.
Oh, yes, he did.
And
Fields?
he didn't call himself out of a football game either.
That's fair.
like, you questioning his character. Like,
That's fair.
I'm not trading for that guy. I'm not handing that guy the keys to the organization to be whether we are in a rebuild or we're trying to compete with him long term. I don't want that guy on my
Maybe
team.
this is a better way for me to ask it. Would you guys rather have Justin Fields or Anthony Richardson as the starting quarterback for the Steelers next year?
I'd go Fields.
I'd go Richardson for upside.
That's what I would do too.
I've seen Fields already, and I know Russell Wilson outplayed him.
I do think that Fields is worthy of a starting job somewhere at one of these teams that doesn't
If
have
I'm
an
the Colts,
answer.
I'd bring Justin Fields in.
Sure.
It'd be like, screw it, let's just try
Put
this.
Fields in the package for Richardson.
Yeah, let's just try. I mean, honestly, a quarterback switch. Let's just try this.
I would rather have Fields than Russell Wilson or Kirk Cousins or Jimmy G or one of these other retread options. At least Fields, there's potentially some upside there. He had some good moments last year with the Steelers. All right, coming up in about 15 minutes or so here on BK and Ferrario with Alex and T-Bone on BK. Is this the roster outlook that gets you excited for the Cardinals heading into the upcoming season? We'll talk about that here in just a little bit. The Junk Drawer is coming up next here on 101 ESPN. Alongside Alex and T-Bone, I'm BK. Alex, have you seen this stuff with Gene Hackman today, man?
Yeah, it's wild.
So Gene Hackman, his wife, and their dog were all found passed away in their New Mexico home earlier today. Gene Hackman was 95 years old, and so honestly, when I saw this story this morning, I just assumed Gene Hackman had passed through natural causes, right? He's 95. He's getting up there in age, so this was, something that you could have anticipated coming. And yet you look into the story and you read a little bit more about it. You see his wife was also found
63 years old, too.
And their dog was found dead at the same time. The story comes from CNN. Cause of death has not been confirmed, but the circumstances surrounding the death of the two deceased individuals are considered to be suspicious enough in nature to require a thorough search and investigation, according to a sheriff.
And 9 minutes ago, the New York Times put out that no signs of carbon monoxide leak in their deaths. So this, the moment I saw this, I was like, oh, damn, because I love Gene Hackman. Replacements, Behind Enemy Lines, Heartbreakers, he's been in incredible movies. It's one of my favorite, yeah. And then I saw it, I'm like, oh, okay, wow, 95 years old. You expect, he looked bad, too. And then you saw his wife, who's 63 years old, and his dog, and what I heard this morning, at least reading it, was that his wife had been dead for 48 hours prior to Gene Hackman's passing when they found them. So this, to me, screams something else.
Man, I hope not. The deputy said in the document that he found Hackman's wife lying on the ground inside of a bathroom. There was a space heater near her head, an open bottle of prescription pills on the counter nearby. A dog was found in the bathroom closet. Hackman's body was then found discovered on the ground in another room near the kitchen. The deputy said that he suspected the male individual had suddenly fallen. Both Hackman and his wife appeared to have died days earlier.
This screams Netflix documentary.
Two other healthy dogs were found in other parts of the residence. The front door was opened and unsecured. There were no signs of forced entry or theft.
This is going to be something that moves forward, especially because I thought it was the carbon monoxide. I'm like, all right, well, you get multiple people passing away. Maybe they just didn't know there was a leak in the house. But 9 minutes ago, they said that that's not the case. So this screams suspicious activity.
That's the other thing that's probably worth mentioning. Yeah. They said that that's not the case.
This screams suspicious activity, which is just wild to me. To have a dog found locked up in a closet and then multiple other healthy dogs in other areas of the room and the door wide open. I find myself a true crime nut. This stuff I just find fascinating to me. But yeah, this screams suspicious.
Man, this is tough. When you think Gene Hackman, Alex, the hard right pivot.
Don't get political on me here.
No. I see what you did there.
Thanks.
What is the movie that immediately comes to mind for you?
Replacements.
That's got to be our age, right?
Yeah, because I wasn't. I saw Hoosiers, loved Hoosiers growing up, but that was way before me. Replacements was right when I was 9 years old, and I loved that.
That was my favorite movie growing up.
Keanu Reeves.
Not necessarily a good movie, but my favorite movie, right?
Heartbreakers as well. I have a huge crush on Jennifer Love Hewitt, so Heartbreakers was one for me. And then Behind Enemy Lines with Owen Wilson is another really good one.
T-Bone? I know you're not. You
I
like
don't know if you know Gene Hackman.
I was curious. What is your relationship as a movie or TV consumer with Gene Hackman?
I don't know. When I saw the news that he had passed away, I was not familiar with the name and I did not recognize him.
He's 95, so I'm not shocked you're 12.
Sure,
so.
but I saw a photo when he was in his prime, and I still didn't recognize. Hoosiers, never seen it. What was the one you said you enjoyed?
Replacements.
Never seen it. And all these
I think he stopped doing movies.
99, August of 99.
Okay, so he did 5 movies after.
Yeah, I was going to say I don't think he did movies.
Yeah, so I don't. But some of those are classics. So at some point I'll get there to watch them because I do like watching TV shows and movies and even some of the oldies. So, but yeah, when I saw the news, I didn't recognize him or the name.
He's one of my favorites.
Burning was one of my favorites that he was in.
Yeah. He's just always, every character, to me, he's kind of like what Denzel Washington is. It's every movie he's in always seemed to turn out really good. And he just had a certain role that just worked in almost everything that he played.
Yep. I love Gene Hackman.
Yeah, I did too. Which is why this is even more heartbreaking that something suspicious may have gone down because it's damn, for somebody as good as he was, you hate to see something like this.
No doubt. It typically doesn't end well, but this is not This is just a weird story to wake up to.
Enemy of the
today.
State was another really good one with Will Smith.
Fantastic one. Really, really good movie back in the day. All right, with Alex and T-Bone, I'm BK. Coming up in about 15 minutes, we've got to get into our favorite. Thursdays means believe it or not. So 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line. Believe it or not, coming up in about 15 minutes. But next, I feel like this is the rosy outlook for the 2025 Cardinal season, and I think we could use a little bit of that in our lives. Let's talk about it next here on 101 ESPN. Alongside Alex and T-Bone, I'm BK. So I've got a rosy outlook for the Cardinals. You ready for this?
I'm
I know
checking
it's
out of this segment.
Shocker.
Wait, to me or him?
No, him.
Okay.
It's a typecast actor that's going through a really different phase of their lives. That's me right now. I'm pushing myself to try to give a rosy outlook for the St. Louis Cardinals.
Too soon after Gene Hackman, man. Come on.
Okay. So, what if this is what their plan is? How would you feel about it? And I'm not telling you it is for sure, but 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line. YouTube chat is available for you at youtube.com/101ESPNSTL. I was listening to the Fast Lane yesterday. I was on my way to pick up the little man from daycare, about 4:15, 4:30. And I heard they were just crushing the Cardinals for the way that they've spent their offseason. And I don't blame them.
I love
get
those
it.
guys.
They're saying how they hate that they didn't give any of the young guys the opportunities that they had been talking about. You know, you look at McGreevy, you see Quinn Matthews, you can get excited about them starting for you. You look at the young players, whether it's Gorman or Nootbaar or Burleson. You see Victor Scott out there. And it's like, man, why can't we just have all of these players in the lineup every day? And I was sitting there, I'm thinking, you know, I kind of agree with a lot of what they're saying. If I was going to push back on anything, it would be the rotation, just because, like, I do understand you kind of want to be able to backfill. And if you did trade Matz and Fetty this offseason, you have no depth to your rotation. But let's set that aside.
Fine, trade one of them, put the other in the bullpen, and have the depth in the bullpen.
Sure. If I was to give you a rosy outlook for the 2025 season, it would be this, Alex. The Cardinals are taking this year to reset the books. And they're going to walk away from Ryan Helsley or trade him at the deadline. I think it's the most likely option. They're probably going to either walk away or trade Eric Fetty at some point between now and the end of the season. And they're going to walk away from Miles Mikolas as well, Steven Matz as well. It's like $45 million off of the books after already saving, $35 or $40 million so far since the end of last season. You're talking about a cut of like $80 million compared to where you were at the end of the 2024 season. Now, a skeptic would say, cool, the DeWitts are getting rich off of this.
Me, I would say that.
Me, a rosy outlook fan, would say they want to find out what they have in these young guys, and then they can make decisions. And when they make those decisions, it might be, hey, Lars Nootbaar can't stay healthy. He still has shown this promise that he's shown in the first few years of his career. We can't build around that. That can't be a guy that we trust going into opening day in our lineup going into next season. We're going to trade him for the starting pitcher that we need to be our number 2. And now we've got Sonny Gray, that starting pitcher that we just traded for, Quinn Matthews, Michael McGreevy, and Andre Palante. That's our starting 5 rotation-wise. And then we're going to go out to the market because we traded for a cost-controlled starter with Lars Nootbaar as the chip that we played. We could do that with others, but let's use him as the example in this scenario. And we're going to spend real money, big money, on Vlad Guerrero or Kyle Tucker or one of these big-time free agents that's hitting the market this offseason. Or instead of going to the very, very tippy top of the market, it's a pretty damn good market next year, dude. We're going to go sign Luis Arraez or Kyle Schwarber or Cedric Mullins. Like, we're going to go get a legit dude for the middle of our order this offseason. Maybe even 2 of them. Maybe you get Luis Arraez and Kyle Schwarber next offseason. And now your lineup looks completely different heading into 2026. If that's the plan, I don't know that it is, but let's go down this path together, walking down. How do you feel as a Cardinals fan, if that's the way that this thing goes, and this time next year, we're talking about them having done that?
And I have to put the rosy-colored glasses on?
Put it on for just a minute, man. Okay. I understand you're going to burn this down to the ground here in a moment, but for this segment...
Yeah, I'm the bad guy.
Just for a moment, let's walk down this path of that being the plan.
Okay. One, I look at this team as different. They either learned a lesson or they've changed their process, which is a very gratifying feeling if I'm a fan, because for the longest time I've looked at this organization and said, no, they're not going to do this. And now you're doing it? Oh, okay. Now I'm interested. And I would go down more of the path of signing one of the top guys rather than sign 2 of the next tier. Because
I agree, but there's a scenario where they just don't want to sign in St. Louis.
I know.
So I have to be open to that.
It's just, for me, 2 of the next year feels a lot like what the Cardinals have done in the past, to where it's like you go get the top guy and that changes the outlook. But regardless, if I get the answers this season from a lot of these complementary pieces and nobody really takes that step to stardom for me, but Walker's really good, Donovan's really good, Gorman's really good, I've got the pieces. Now I look at this and I say, cool, you're going to go out there and find that missing piece for this team and say, now we're ready to go on a little bit of a run here. We trust the process. We've got the development, and now we've implemented the star in the middle of this lineup. I'm optimistic, and I'm excited about this Cardinals team if you pull that off.
Yeah, I think if you can do that, because like odds are this season, they're looking at, 4 young bats, I would say. Odds are you're going to probably feel good about at minimum 1 at the end of the season. And there's odds are 1 is going to flop and you're not going to feel good about it. But if you hit on at least 1 and then you go out and supplement it with like adding a star or going out and even adding just a second tier guy that can really help you, you really accelerate this thing to potentially get into a winning window based on the division that you are in. And that is where it is. if we go back, like looking at the money they have on the books for 2026, right now $75 million guaranteed on the books.
And if you add in what they have, like from arbitration, the expected arbitration, it's like $105 million.
Yeah. So and
add in the other entry level, you're looking at like 120, 125, something like that.
And the reason I bring that up, and I wasn't even going to round up with the ARB numbers, just to give you a perspective as what they could have, is if they do want to get back to what they have said, which is, hey, we do want to get back at some point. We will get back at some point, is what the DeWitts have kind of hinted at as, hey, we'll get back to what we were normally spending. That's $100 million based on where they were 2 years ago that they have to play with. Now, yes, a chunk of that does get eaten up with the arm and the guys that are aren't in the arbitration, but on the entry level, that's still like $60 to $70 million probably to play with. You can go get a dude and also a second-tier guy with that.
So last year, they were at 180 in terms of their payroll, $180 million. As of today, they are projected to be right around 135 to 140, depending on where you look. Next year, you're talking like 120, 115, something like that. That is $65 million, potentially, that they have cut from spending last year to where they would be at the start of this upcoming offseason. And that's with Arenado and with Sonny Gray and with Wilson Contreras remaining on the books, which is not a guarantee. It's entirely possible that one of them or multiple end up being elsewhere at the start of next season. It could look very different going into 2026. And that doesn't mean it's good, but in this rosy scenario that we are presenting to you right now, it could be. Man, if they go out there and they end up signing Luis Arraez, is anybody going to be mad about that?
Oh, I would want more.
Yeah, I would want
to me,
more.
that would be that would be old Cardinals.
That feels very Cardinals.
Because he is not
He's not a difference maker. He's not a middle of the order bat.
He is a really good complementary piece. He's never a guy I look at on a roster and go, that's the reason you're winning.
He's not the guy that you're going to win a championship because of.
Probably not.
And I don't know where the hell he plays defensively.
Well, yeah, you're bringing in another infielder.
First base, DH. That's probably.
And I wasn't even
just signing a DH.
And I wasn't even talking just like where he plays on the Cardinals, like just long term thinking about like when I think Luis Arraez, what position is he playing?
Yeah, that just feels too Cardinals-y to me. That feels too like, well, we couldn't get the best, so we're going to go get the next level.
Like if you go get Luis Arraez, I don't think he's going to get more than $20 million a year. I think he's probably pretty similar to what the Wilson Contreras contract was because of what you're saying, where there's no defensive value. So sure, yeah. But guess what? Now, instead of having that pop gun offseason, they could go out and get like Luis Arraez and Kyle Schwarber, or Luis Arraez and Cedric Mullins, or Luis Arraez and, hey, you know what? We actually don't have that number 2 starter. We traded Lars Nootbaar, whoever the guy is that they decide to move on from that still has value but isn't quite what they were hoping to be able to. Maybe it's Gorman because J.J. Weatherholt flew through the system, something like that. So we're going to get Luis Arraez, and then we're going to go make the move for a starter, and we're going to sign Zach Allen. We're going to sign Dylan Cease, one of those big-time, like, legit dudes to pair with Sonny Gray at the front end of our rotation. That is the kind of money that you could have available for you next offseason. I don't know that the Cardinals will do it. I would bet against it. But if this team is actually changing the way that they are going about things, and this offseason was different, say what you will about whether or not you liked it. The Cardinals never have off seasons like this where they do nothing. It doesn't happen. It's the first time it's happened in the entire John Mozeliak tenure. So that alone is a shift in philosophy from what they have been previously. Dude, Cardinals of old absolutely would have brought back Kyle Gibson this year. 100% would have brought him back. Paul Goldschmidt, guaranteed he would have been back on this team going into the 2025 season in previous iterations of what the Cardinals were trying to accomplish. So at least they have shifted their focus a bit. And now it's about how much can they actually do with that? Like, what does... I think that's what makes 2025 so interesting to me, is less about this upcoming season and more about, okay, what does this mean? Where are they going? What is the plan from here? Because it's cool to take the step back and then have the youth movement. That's great. What does the youth movement become? Where does that lead you to? When you take this money off of the books, are you just going cheap now? Are you now the Guardians? Or are you going to add to it and use those savings in the future when you get that return on your young players? And now we can go get these dudes that can actually change the outlook for the team. That's what I hope they do.
And I think, like, and it depends on which guys hit as well. Like, if Walker doesn't hit and Gorman is good, but, like, I don't know how you value that kind of a player, which we've talked about in the past. and then you go out and you spend money on Luis Ariz, to me, that is falling victim back to what you did previously.
So what would they have to do for that to be?
I think if Walker doesn't end up, if you don't see signs that Walker's the middle of the bat guy, and like they're not going to start him there this year, like he's probably, based on the way they've been doing lineups in spring, he's going to hit anywhere between 6 and 9.
Yeah, bottom 4.
If he clicks, he's a guy that will eventually probably move into like the 5th spot, or maybe up to 3, and you put Contreras in the 2 and you keep Arenado and clean up. But if you don't get that guy to develop to be that bat, or Herrera to become that bat, it's got to become they've got, if they're going to go out and spend, it cannot be in that second tier, and that's what Ariz is to me. But that would have to be the Tucker.
Unfair. I think it's wildly unfair to do that because, like, I don't think Vlad Guerrero Jr. is signing in St. Louis.
Put yourself in the conversation, though. If he doesn't, if he just doesn't want, I'm saying geography-wise, I don't think he wants to play here. Well, that's fine, but what we're saying is they're not putting themselves in that market.
Sometimes you can't. The Tigers were never going to be able to sign Bregman this offseason because he didn't want to play in Detroit.
Yet they were in that market, though.
They called him.
They tried.
They offered him.
Does it? No Cardinals fan is going to care if they fall second again. Like, if they finish second in another one of these bidding wars, no Cardinals fan is going to give them credit for that.
When was the last time they fell second into these bidding wars?
Every offseason for like a 6-year stretch, they were second in the bidding wars.
In this bidding,
yeah,
in this
David
market.
Price, they were second in that bidding war. They tried for Giancarlo Stanton, and they didn't get of him. I remember having these conversations on the air where it was like, oh, St. Louis is not the same destination that it once was. And then they got Goldie, and they got Arenado. Like, they did all of these other things. But, yeah, I think there's a real chance that Vlad Guerrero Jr. just doesn't want to play here. And that's okay. Like, sometimes Mitch Marner probably doesn't want to play in St. Louis, man. And that's okay. And, like, I'm not going to crush the Blues for not being able to acquire Mitch Marner if he doesn't want to play in your city. Now, Kyle Tucker feels different to me. If Kyle Tucker is the guy that the Cardinals want to go out there and acquire, go get him. Go make the best offer available to him and make him tell you no. But if you end up, like, if that's the only opportunity for you this upcoming offseason, to go out there and acquire a superstar and you fall short, it's hard for me to crush the organization when there is one guy and there are probably 25 teams that would like to have him, and you fall short to the Yankees or the Dodgers or the Mets or the Phillies.
Yep.
Like, yeah, sometimes that happens, man.
But the goal is to get a middle of the order bat.
Yeah, and what I was saying was I wasn't crushing them if they miss on those guys. What I was getting at is the pivot then shouldn't be let's add a leadoff hitter in Luis Ariz.
Yeah. But there is no other pivot.
But I don't. Then to me, you will end up holding that money is what you would end up doing.
And then you're bad again.
Or you go to the trade market.
You're probably at that spot where you're in development mode.
Or you go to the trade market.
I'm not throwing. Yeah, or if there's a star that becomes available.
You can't go there and say like, oh, we couldn't get a star, so we're going to go get 2 of the next tier and hope that those guys become a star. That's not mission accomplished. You're just going to the next level, but you're going to backup plan.
But I mean, Luis Ariz is a good player, guys.
I agree, but I don't think he fits what you need.
He's not a middle of the order bat.
Like, you have Luis Ariz, better version of Luis Ariz. Now, he doesn't hit 350 or whatever the hell he hits.
But you kind of important. Luis Ariz is a difference maker,
But it's about the position, right? Like, why do I not like their lineup right now? It's because they don't have a 5-hole hitter.
They
don't have a middle of the order bat.
He's a 5-hole hitter.
No, he's a leadoff guy. If you're hitting Luis Ariz in the 5th spot, it's the same conversation I'm having about Donovan, which I don't like where he hits 5th.
330, dude.
Yeah, but
he's not a slugger. When I'm talking middle of the order with 3, 4, 5 or 2, 3, 4, I'm looking at that guy being a guy that makes a difference maker. It's all about the lineup construction for me.
You're still looking for a middle of the order bat.
He slugged 2 years ago, for what it's worth.
He's not the piece that you've been asking for the last 10 years and saying that, well, we're going to have to develop him internally.
That guy probably doesn't exist.
But there's 2 of them on the market.
I love Vlad Guerrero Jr. He's amazing. He's not coming to St. Louis, man. So there's one. There's one. There's one on the market, and his name's Kyle Tucker. And you know what people are going to say next year whenever he becomes a free agent? Yeah, that's Lars Nootbaar. It's Lars Nootbaar plus because he gets hurt. He's got an injury history. And so what Cardinals fans would then end up looking like, that's unfair. What some fans would then end up saying is you just signed Lars Nootbaar to a $40 million per year contract. You're giving him $400 million. This is the guy that you go spend on. And so the reason I bring this up is I was hopeful that this was going to become a rosy outlook for the Cardinals.
Wasn't until you brought it up.
Yeah, well, you know who your audience was when you were telling T-Bone and I.
I mean, that is the second tier of free agent. Like there are 2 superstars, and then the second tier of free agent, I think, is a really good tier this year compared to normal. That's way better than what the second tier of free agency was this year. Schwarber, Ozuna, who you're not going to go out there and get. Eugenio Suarez, I'm not interested. But then Luis Ariz, JT Realmuto, and Cedric Mullins. You don't need JT Realmuto. You already have a bunch of that. So it's Schwarber, Arise, Mullins. Those are the three, basically, that are available to you in that second tier. If they go out there and add two of them next offseason, I don't know, man. If you get like Luis Arise and Cedric Mullins, it's a hell of an offseason. Those are really good players in the middle of your order. No, they're not superstars. Guess what? Superstars don't become available. You got to develop them. With Alex and T-Bone, I'm BK. Believe it or not, it's next.
Order. All right, let's do the rosy version
Let's
of
put
this.
the rosy glasses on here, guys.
Believe it or not, I'm walking on air. I never thought I could feel so
Free, flying away on a wing and a prayer. Who could it be?
Believe it or not, It's just me.
314-399-9646 is
Can't
the Air
ruin
Comfort
that.
Service text line to get involved in the show. If you guys have a scenario, we will tell you if we are believing it or not here on BK and Ferrario. I was just called a fraud during the break.
No,
so
a big
things
fat
are
phony is what we called you.
Sorry, a phony during the break. So things are going super well here on BK and
I think
Ferrario.
I said you suck too. So.
You
There's a lot
you
that was
spew
thrown
a lot
out
of nonsense to
during the
try and
commercial
stir
break.
up arguments. And I just don't
I
appreciate
swear
it.
that's not my goal. I just want to have good conversations with you guys.
You
All
just
right.
piss us off a lot.
It's okay. I can remember what that conversation was until we were about 5 minutes into that
Yeah,
segment.
that's on me. I should have gotten to the point quicker.
You need to
All right.
communicate better.
This is news from Ian Rappaport. The Chiefs are planning to franchise tag their guard Trey Smith. 1 year, $23 million, fully guaranteed for Trey Smith. Good money if you can get it. Guys, believe it or not, the increase in the cap, which was just announced officially earlier today, is going to result in a much less interesting offseason for free agency than we previously expected. Because teams will potentially use the franchise tag. They'll keep their own guys more than they expected because they have more money available to you.
I'm going to say not believe it because I think we see some trades that make it interesting.
Okay.
Like the free agent side of things, I do agree. I think you're going to see a lot of guys stick with their team. But I wonder if the trade market then gets a lot more exciting between now and the start of the season. So I'm going to say not believe it.
I mean, I think I'm going to believe it. Because, like, when I think of the trades, now, maybe there's somebody I'm forgetting, but, like, I think T. Higgins, like, when he brought that up, was, okay, maybe they tag him, they trade him. But if the cap's going up, I could see where they just tag him and keep him and run it back because it keeps Burrow happy.
Matt Stafford gets traded. Apparently, the Cowboys are trying to get the Titans to trade the first overall pick. Dak Prescott gets traded.
I still am going to say believe it, though. Stafford would change things, and that one feels like it's trending. I'm still going to hold out hope he's a Ram. But
That's not happening.
I'm going to believe this. I think it's going to be a pretty dull offseason.
I'm believing it. Not only do I think it's going to be a dull offseason, I also think that you could see some of the guys that we thought were going to become available on the free agent market, like Sam Darnold. Maybe you see a franchise tag now or a transition tag for a guy like Sam Darnold, and not to come back to the Vikings, but he ends up getting dealt, and that limits the market that he could have otherwise had. Trey Smith was supposed to be like a top 3 free agent this offseason, and now he's not going to be hitting the market. I wonder what T. Higgins what happens with T. Higgins now. I think they're going to franchise tag him, guys. And I don't know that that means they're going to get a deal done with him. I just think it means they're not allowing anybody else to get a deal done with him. So I believe this. Alex, what do you got for us?
All right, guys, believe it or not, because the next time we do this, probably going to be right at the buzzer of the trade deadline. Believe it or not, at least 3 Blues players are on a different team by next Thursday at 2 o'clock.
I'm not. I think they end up standing pat. If I had to bet today on what they do at the deadline, I think they do nothing.
Does a 6-0 loss tonight change your mind on that? I'm not saying that's going to happen. I'm just asking.
Let me say this way. I do not think it changes the core roster stuff that we've talked about. It's fun to talk about, and I do think it's worthwhile to talk about. Obviously, that's why we've done it. But I don't think it happens at the deadline. I think these are leading to discussions that will take place in the offseason. The one thing that I think could potentially happen is the shin stuff, and that's why we've spent so much time on it, because Toronto is truly desperate. I don't know if the teams are desperate for the other stuff that the Blues have to offer. It feels like those are more, hey, we need to shake things up in the offseason after getting kicked out of the playoffs early once again. So I'm going to say not. I think it's fewer than 3 players are dealt.
Yeah, I'm not going to believe it either. I feel like they're going to end up standing pat. And what I have trouble deciding is, do they stand pat because Army ends up believing in the team because they either play really well or he just sees something that's like, you know what the hell? What's the worst thing that can happen? Or he stands pat because he had to stand pat in terms of, like, he just couldn't move Shen. Whether it be his no trade, too much money, too hard to work a deal. Same with the Falk, same with whoever else, Letty, Kyrou, whoever you're talking about with the core, Buchnevich. So I'm going to say not believe it.
I put it at 3 for a reason, because I think if the over-under was set at 2.5, I'd take the under, but I do think we see multiple guys get traded by Thursday. I view it as, yes, maybe they go on a little bit of a run and they look at this as standing pat, but I also look at this as them saying, well, we got to open up playing time in certain spots at some point. And I'm looking at defense, and I'm looking at your bottom 6. I don't know who gets moved. I don't know if it's a Suter or a guy with term, or maybe a Sundqvist or a Foxa. To me, they're going to be looking at this as we've got to open up some spots for playing time. And I really wonder is, even if we look at it as a standing pat, they still find a way to move out 2 guys.
T-Bone?
Guys, believe it or not, we will see 2 or more Cardinals, likely would be 2, hit 30 home runs this season.
You get 1, and I think
it.
it's Wilson Contreras.
I could get 2. I think Gorman's going to hit 30 home runs. That does not mean he has a good season.
Not gonna lie, I forgot about him during this scenario.
I mean,
That's because you realize it's not happening.
But the guy I was thinking of was Arenado bounce back. That's where I was
Sure.
gonna see if I got somebody.
I think he gets to like
This is more of
25.
a got you question than anything else.
didn't Patrick Wisdom hit 30 home runs a couple of years ago? Not all the guys that hit 30 home runs are good baseball players.
I don't remember if he did or not. He might have on that bad Cubs team.
Somebody's
20
got to hit, am I right?
No, seriously, if you go up
2021.
there 600 times,
28.
600 plate appearances, and you connect a few times, like you can have a average season with 30 home runs.
He had
in terms of
28,
overall
25,
production.
and 23.
Yeah, Patrick Wisdom is not a good hitter.
I think Gorman could get 25. I think Arenado could get 25.
Okay, in 2021, this was the season that I was thinking of. Sorry to cut you off there, Alex. Patrick Wisdom played in 105 games for the Cubs and had 28 home runs.
Man, he only played 105 games.
We let another one
He
go.
struck out 153 times in 338 at-bats.
Oh, Gorman could outdo that.
That is almost a 40% strikeout rate that season.
Gorman's
and
going for
yet,
50.
28 home runs. So, yeah, I think Gorman's hitting 30 home runs just by virtue of him having 500-plus at-bats this year.
I've fallen trap to this one before, and I won't believe it until I see it. I say he gets 25, and that'll be it.
Gorman's done close to 30, though, before.
Problem is for the Cardinals right now, and it'll be really interesting to see what happens if, of course, Arenado's here. Let's just say Siani's the center fielder, right? They decide, you know what, better off Newbar in a corner. Scott's still not ready. Siani's the guy in center field. And Gorman goes through the same struggles he had last year because before, like originally it was like, oh, youth movement, you do the 600 plate appearances. They do have a little bit of an out. They could go Donovan at second, and then they can give Burleson at bats as the DH. So, and they want to kind of know what they have with him too. I'm going to say not believe it. I think it will just be Contreras. I think Gorman will get close. I don't believe Arenado's bouncing back. I think they will just have the one guy hit the 30 bombs.
Is Rowdy Tellez a good baseball player?
No.
He hit 35 home runs in 2022. 35 home Milwaukee. 35 home runs. He had a
was a
760 OPS.
He was rowdy that season.
219 batting average, struck out 121. This is not as big of an accomplishment as I think some people make it out to be.
How come nobody did it with us last year?
Because they stunk.
We didn't even get a 25 home run.
stink again,
Wait, we
man.
didn't even get a 25 home run hitter.
Oh, no, we suck again.
Somebody in the text line said, BK thinks Luis Ariz is going to hit 33 home runs for the Cardinals this year.
Oh, he
Right in the middle of the order, too.
314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line for Believe It or Not. You guys give us a scenario. We'll tell you if we believe it or not here on BK and Ferrario. Guys, believe it or not, the Kachuk players will end up playing together in Florida and not St. Louis.
Not believe it. I don't think Florida's going to be able to pull that off. I think it's going to be too much money, and I think they have other priorities that they're going to have to figure out. They've got to figure out defense. If Aaron Ekblad's not going to be a part of that team, going to have to figure out another centerman spot if Sam Bennett's not on this team. So, no, I'm not believing this.
I'm going to believe it because they're already halfway there compared to us. We're at zero.
Until
We're at 0% of the Kachucks. They're at 50.
Until he is playing for St. Louis, and then you're going to start believing Matthew will play for St. Louis, and they'll both play here.
Lure him here.
Why wasn't Matthew here the first time?
That wasn't my fault.
Believe it or not, guys, next one up here, I'm not believing that either. Believe it or not, Missouri ends up winning 30 games this year. The Missouri basketball team wins 30 games. They are at 21 right now. They have 3 games remaining in the regular season. Vandy and Oklahoma on the road, and Kentucky at home. They are projected to win all 3 by KenPom, although they are like 60-40 games in favor of Mizzou. So if you gave it to them, they would be at 24. You then potentially, I think if you went out, you'll have the double bye, but let's assume they don't. Probably win that first game. That second game would potentially be against like Florida, I think it is.
This is the SEC tournament you're talking about.
Yep. So then you
So
get
that's 4.
one more win. That'd be 5.
I like how you just
2
assumed
wins
they'll
in the
beat Florida.
SEC tournament. And then you're into the NCAA tournament. You'd need 2 wins in order to get to 30. So believe it or not, guys, Missouri gets to 30 wins this year in basketball.
I'll believe this one. I think if you win out, you're confident you're going to win the SEC tournament game, and then it's just a matter of winning 2 in the March Madness, and I believe they can do that. I think they get to the Elite 8, and that's where I really find out what this team is.
I'm going to say not believe it. I don't think they're getting to 30. I don't see it.
That's because you've been watching
I
bad
also think-
basketball for a really long time, and you just don't see
beat
good
Iowa
basketball.
by 20. I think they're going to lose the final regular season game, so that already deducts one number.
Yeah.
Then you get
3 in
1
the
or 2
tournament.
in the SEC, and then you get 32, maybe 30. Yeah, I don't know. I'm gonna say not.
If you think they're losing that last game in the regular season, that really makes it difficult for them to get to 30, unless you think they're going to the Final Four.
Yeah, and I think they're probably not going Final Four, so I'm not believing it.
I'll go ahead and believe it just because I'm optimistic about this team and I'm feeling rosy about them. Coming up next, the Robert Thomas line is about to have another big test tonight against the Washington Capitals. Alex breaks it down for you next year on 101 ESPN.
Tanner Hendrickson here with a Sports Center update brought to you by Saliga Heating and Cooling. Cardinals in spring training action as they're taking on the Miami Marlins today, and they lead them 5-4 in the bottom of the fifth inning. And tonight here on 101 ESPN, Blues back in action as they visit the Washington Capitals while bringing coverage starting at 5 o'clock with Alex Ferrario. Puck drop at 6. The Sports Update is brought to you by Saliga Heating and Cooling, an independent brand standard heating and air conditioning dealer.
Alongside Alex and T-Bone on BK, big game tonight for the St. Louis Blues. They're going to be in action in the nation's capital against Washington. Pre-game at 5, puck drop at 6 right here on your home of the Blues, 101 ESPN. Alex, the line that we're going to be watching is going to be the line that we have been basically since they returned from this break, and that's that top line for the Blues with Robert Thomas, Pavel Buchnevich. They look like themselves again, and they've dominated basically ever since they came back from that Four Nations face-off. What are you watching for them tonight against the Capitals and what they have on their top line?
Their ability to continue the two-way style. They just wrapped up a 3-game stretch. 2 teams that they played, 4 players are in the top 12 of scoring in the National Hockey League in terms of Winnipeg and Colorado. And you know how many points those 4 players scored against the Blues in those 2 games? 2. Almost. 2 assists. It was Scheifele and Kyle Connor that got assists on some weird deflections that beat Joel Hofer. But Colorado, Natchez and McKinnon didn't have a point. You're going up against arguably 2 of the hottest players right now in the National Hockey League in terms of Dylan Strome and Alex Ovechkin as a top line. This is going to be a game, in my opinion, of cool. Are you consistent now? Because since they've returned, it's a 3-game stretch, so technically it doesn't really matter. But Robert Thomas has the most points of any NHL forward in those 3 games, and Pavel Buchnevich is tied for second with 5 points. They got 11 points in 2 games, on top of being a plus 10. Can you do that against another team's top line on the road? Because as much as we talk about the offense, you know the offense is there for Robert Thomas. You know the offense is there for Pavel Buchnevich. Frankly, it was just a really bad stretch from middle of December until January. But if you go out there in 3 straight games against some really good offenses and find a way to not only shut them down, but generate offense on the other side, that's how you switch the narrative back to, oh, okay, these guys have something here, rather than us talking about, do they need to make core moves? Was Buchnevich a bad signing by them to give them that contract extension? Man, if you can go out there and shut down Ovechkin and Dylan Strome on top of doing it against Winnipeg and Colorado, yeah, narrative shifts a little bit to, Blues might have the core pieces that we talked about.
I know this has been a weird month for hockey because of the Four Nations face-off, but what they've done offensively, talking about Washington, is just ridiculous. Yeah. Especially Alex Ovechkin. So this is in 7 games in the month of February that they've played so far. All right, Alex?
Hit me with it.
Alex Ovechkin, 7 goals. Tom Wilson, 6 goals. Jacob Chychrun, 4. Dylan Strome, 3. And then they have 4 other players that have at least 2 goals. Again, they've played 7 games this month, and their goal-scoring prowess is just kind of hard to fathom. I want to see what that top line looks like. I also want to see how you look against a team that has the physical capability of Tom Wilson. How does that look against you? The Blues, I think, can potentially match up well against him. Like, what does that look like? I don't know. That is something that I'm looking to find out in this game as well. And I just want to see Jacob Chychrun going up head-to-head against Philip Broberg, because Chychrun was the guy that was the prototype of the type of defenseman that the Blues wanted to acquire, and they basically just got a younger, cheaper version of him in Philip Broberg. So I kind of want to watch those 2 guys on the ice together as well.
And I mean, Chychrun's had an outstanding season, but the Tom Wilson one's a really good point because we talked about it yesterday. You've limited 3 teams to less than 6 high-danger scoring chances and some really good offenses. Well, those are some. Winnipeg is essentially what Washington is. Like, Washington and Winnipeg have scored the same amount of goals. They've limited the amount of goals on the other side. So, yeah, what do you look like there? Can you continue to generate offense? Because this is a team that can play stingier defensively. They've got really good goaltending. You got Chucky Sideburns tonight in between the pipes for Washington.
Oh, really? Great.
So, you know, this is another test, just like the LA Kings are going to be a test on Saturday. But to me, the biggest part of that test, the part that I really want to get answers on, is were those 2 games, 3 games just a blip on the radar with Thomas and Buch? Or are they back to being themselves and January was just a bad month?
And if they are, Totally changes the outlook for the rest of the season. With Alex and T-Bone on BK, Blues versus Capitals tonight, right here on 101 ESPN. Alex has your pregame coverage a little early tonight, so don't miss it. Starting at 5 o'clock, puck drop coming up at 6. Coming up next, we'll hit the rewind here on 101 ESPN. With Alex and T-Bone, I'm BK. If you missed anything from today's show, be sure to check it out on the podcast page, 101ESPN.com, and the free 101ESPN app is where you go to find it. It's all presented by
Schaefer Door Company.
Had a good conversation earlier today with Joey Vitale and a great interview with Nick Kypreos, former NHLer. You may remember him as a Blues fan. Now he's on the Insider Game for Sportsnet. He has his trade target list, Alex, up over there. Has a bunch of Blues on that list. He was the one that we talked about his list yesterday. He joined us to talk about the possibility of Braden Shen as a Toronto Maple Leaf. He said on a scale of 1 to 10, the pressure on Brendan Shanahan is an 11 up there in Toronto right now, and they are desperate to get deep into the postseason. I wanted to ask you a question that was just presented over in our YouTube chat from Mac. He says, I'm late, but Domi and Nyes for Shin with a little bit of money retained on the Blue side of things is the only way that I can see the Maple Leafs doing anything with Nyes. Is that something that you'd be interested in?
Yeah, absolutely.
Max Domi and Nyes, and in return, the Blues give them Braden Shen with some salary retention.
I actually think you might have to give up you'd have to give up something else to Toronto, because that's two roster players for one roster player, and they'd be like, well, we got to fill another spot. But you're talking like, I don't know, like a Fox or something like that goes the other way for them. But
and Domi is just a cap. We don't want this contract. It's actually a negative asset at this point.
But and I would take on Max Domi because I'm getting Matthew Nyes. And Max Domi is not a good player. Max Domi, frankly, is not the guy that he used to be, and he technically kind of is a liability.
But he's got 3 years at $3.7 million per year.
And $3.75 million per year on top of you getting rid of Braden Shannon. In this scenario, you're eating $2 million.
It's basically neutral money-wise.
And so I'm probably looking at Matthew Nyes getting somewhere between like $2.5 to $3.5 million. I would look at the Max Domi thing and say, cool, you're a bottom six winger or centerman for me. I don't bring back a Radek Faksa, and you just fall into my fourth line role. And then we'll see what it looks like next year in terms of competition. But yeah, I would bring a Max Domi in if I'm getting Matthew Nyes, because the whole goal is to bring in an upgrade. And Matthew Nyes is a top six winger. I don't know if I can label him a top-line winger yet. And frankly, he's playing that with Toronto, but also remember who he's playing with in Toronto. Austin Matthews and Mitch Marner. It's different when you come here and you play with Robert Thomas. We love Robert Thomas, but he's not Austin Matthews. But it's still an upgrade, and you're still adding more depth to that top six for you. So, yeah, if that's the offer Toronto's coming at me with, yeah, I'll do it.
We got this from Jay Apple in the YouTube chat, who said there's no chance that the Toronto Maple Leafs move on from Nyes. Cool, then they don't.
Don't be so sure, Jay Apple.
And if that's the case, that's no problem.
Then Braden Shen's back next year, which is
Shen
great.
Is a St. Louis Blue. That's their choice. Like, if I'm in Doug Armstrong's shoes after hearing that conversation and thinking about this over the last week or two, if I'm in his shoes, I'm saying to Toronto, listen, if you guys want Braden Shen, that's really great. I totally understand why you would want him. I like Braden Shen as well. And there's one way that you can have him, and one way only. And you better make Matthew Nyes available. And if not, we don't have to have any more conversations. I'll call you every day. You can decide, are you willing to negotiate on Matthew Nyes? Is that a starting point that you're willing to have at this point? And if the answer to that question is no, we don't need to talk any longer. If the answer to that question is yes, then we can have the negotiation where we really dive into, okay, what's the salary retention look like? What's the roster player? All of that stuff is after we talk about whether or not you're willing to include Matthew Nyes. That is the starting point, in my opinion at least, from Doug Armstrong. If they're not willing to do that, there's no reason to have the conversation. You are desperate. We are not. Leverage is a hell of a thing. It's why I think the Cardinals are playing it right with Ryan Helsley. They'll have leverage at the deadline that other teams do not have. They're in desperation mode for a legit lockdown closer to win a World Series. The Blues right now are looking at a team that's desperate to win a cup, and they think their best way to do so is with Braden Shen as a part of their roster. It was reported yesterday. That is the number one target for the Toronto Maple Leafs at the deadline. Cool. You want him? You can get him, but it's going to cost you.
Yeah, people have heard Dylan Cousins' name from the Buffalo Sabres in the rumor mill for the past 2 months. Why hasn't he been traded? Because Buffalo says, why would I trade this guy unless you're giving me something better? He's under contract. We've got him. He's a lot of people's eyes a number 2 centerman. Cool. Give me back a top-line winger or centerman then, because I'm not going to trade you something unless I'm getting an upgrade. There's no point for this Blues team to do a linear move in terms of trade Braden Shen for a 20-year-old centerman who is an AHL centerman. That's not a top 6 winger next year for you.
He's Alex. That's T-Bone. I'm BK. We'll talk to you guys tomorrow at 11 a.m. It sounds like we're going to have Eric Kratz on the show for you guys tomorrow. He was out at Cardinals camp today, so we'll talk with him tomorrow about what his vibe was while he was out there at Cardinals camp. And, of course, it's a Friday. which means we'll be joined by Mike McKenna out at the Centene Community Ice Center. We'll talk to you guys then. The Fast Lane's coming up next here on 101 ESPN.
I don't want to feel anything.